Good evening and welcome to the Monday, March 7th, 2022 School Board Public Hearing and Work Session. The time is now 6 p.m. The school board would like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge we are residing on the traditional land of the Dene people. Our mission is to provide an excellent, equitable education in a safe, supportive environment so all students will succeed and contribute to a diverse and changing society. Mrs. Tuttle, can we get the roll call, please?
Mr. Sampson is expected. Mrs. Matheson?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanderson?
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Marati? Thank you. Mrs. Luke?
Here.
Thank you. The board has a quorum.
Thank you. Public hearing fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. Goals and objectives. Ensure students, staff, families, and the community are informed, connected, and engaged with the district. Public testimony is welcome on the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. First on the list, and when you come up and bear testimony, we do have a seat up front and center. First on the list is Carly Sween. When you come up, if you will please state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
All right. My name is Carly Sween, and I live in Fairbanks, Alaska. This is my 5th year as principal of Lathrop High School, and I've spent many hours looking closely at the course requests for next school year and how I fit student course needs into a master schedule with 5.6 less teachers next year. It is painful, as I have many classes on my potential cut list that I don't want to see go. This includes career tech, advanced placement, music, and additional electives. Not to mention core courses in the mid-30s, which will pack our small classrooms. Honestly, I am not sure how we're going to get there. Less staff means less options for students, and this has come from years of cuts due to enrollment drops and PTR, pupil-teacher ratio increases. I'm here to talk to you tonight specifically about music. Anyone who knows me understands how strongly I support music. Much of the emphasis of testimony regarding music has centered on our district's elementary instrumental program. I'm here to explain the issues at the secondary level and why I feel it's more important to put district resources at the secondary level. COVID hit music hard. At Lathrop, I currently have 2 full-time music teachers. Sadly, my numbers of students requesting music classes has shrunk considerably, and I really have no choice in that I need to reduce music offerings and go with only 1 music teacher at Lathrop. Having 1 individual take on teaching band, choir, orchestra, and guitar is not what is best for students and not what will be best for that teacher stretched so thin. I've been anticipating the situation for months and met recently with West Valley's principal, HR, and district admin to talk through how we can keep secondary music options strong in our district. There is a great vision for improving music options at the 6-8 middle schools. What I'd like to see happen at the high school level is to move our music teachers into 3 district itinerant positions, essentially a band person, a choir person, and an orchestra person, each teaching at both in-town high schools. At least 1 district allocated FTE is needed to make this plan work. It makes sense to focus your music staffing on middle and high schools at this time, and I request you move any music staffing available there.
Ms. Sween, that is time. Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. Oh, wait. Mr. Doran, do you have a clarifying question?
Yes. In terms of music, as you look forward for high school and stuff, one of the questions is when we start it with the 4th grade, 6th grade, do you have a reflection on that, how that impacts you going forward high school level?
Certainly. I mean, in an ideal situation, starting music at 4th grade, instrumental music at 4th grade would be wonderful. I think we're not living in an ideal situation right now. The reality of budget and the also reality of staffing those 4th and 5th grade positions is pretty tough. So COVID has really hurt music dramatically, and I just feel like pushing more of those resources towards middle and high school might be the better way for the district to go, even though really, if we could start them at fourth grade, that's great. But I know Kate LaPlante's going to talk tonight about a plan, which I think helps strengthen music district-wide.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Erin Genoso. Mrs. Tuttle, do we see her online? No? Okay, thank you. Next, we have a Michelle Spillane. If you'll come up, state your first name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Thanks. Leave it on. Okay. I'm Michelle Spillane, the last name spelled Spillane, and I am a resident of Fairbanks. Good evening, members of the school board. Thank you for taking my testimony tonight. I want to acknowledge your hard work and advocacy during the budget process. I too have been reaching out to our state legislators, asking them to make education funding a priority. We are certainly at a pivotal time as it relates to teacher retention, student academic growth, and mental health needs. I'm here tonight to share my concerns about the cuts to secondary education in our school district's proposed budget. I have lived in the Fairbanks area since 1992 and a product of our school system. I'm a business owner, a parent of 2 district students, a teacher, and most recently, a school administrator at North Pole High School. The school district's proposed budget has set high school classrooms at 32 PTR. In order to have a student-driven schedule, we need to adhere to the requests of our students. However, the increase of PTR affects staffing allocations. The proposed reductions take away opportunities from students on all levels and drive class sizes to unsustainable numbers. The proposed budget reductions at North Pole High School include the elimination of certified teachers, the activities coordinator, a full-time counselor, and a support personnel. In addition, we're losing a teacher who facilitates e-learning. These all directly affect students, their opportunities, and their well-being within our community. The activities coordinator is a bang for the buck that our school district should reconsider. They are released from classes to schedule games, meet with coaches, check student eligibility, and facilitate all school activities. Losing a counseling position will result in the elimination of essential services currently addressing the growing crisis of teenage mental health. With one less counselor, each of our counselors at North Pole High School will have over 300 students on their caseload. I am very concerned about what these reductions will do to elevate discipline issues, mental health crisis levels, and staff burnout. My heart sinks when I think about the future of education here in the place I call home. Without the change in funding from our state and our determination to see comprehensive high schools that promote rigorous academic programs, sports and activity opportunities, and mental health supports for all students. Thank you for your consideration, and I ask tonight that these reductions be reconsidered. They matter to our students.
That is time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Robin Miram. If you'll come up, state your first name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Robin Myrum, M-Y-R-U-M, and I live in North Pole. I do a job and a half for just a $10,000 extra stipend, making me well worth the investment. I may not teach 5 classes like other teachers, but I do teach 3 different preps and then do a full-time AC job, even though it's classified as a half-time job. I find it hard to believe that the APs and various other employees who don't have enough time as it is will be able to complete hours of eligibility checks, be available anytime, day or night, to respond to coaches' questions, supervise all the activities and events, coordinate travel, make schedules, complete the countless other tasks I don't have time to mention tonight, or check in with someone in activities who needs a little extra classroom support. So far this semester alone, I have supervised 40 hours worth of sports and activities, with more to come in the spring, not to mention the hours I put in at home doing other AC tasks that I don't have enough time to do when I'm done teaching every day. Last semester, I supervised nearly 80 hours worth of activities. Cutting ACs will cause building administrators to do many hours of extra work. Already underpaid coaches will be tasked with more responsibilities without any more pay. OSA violations will be more likely to occur, and school board policies may not be followed. The school district will be open to a lot more liability, and eventually programs will fold when coaches are too burnt out to continue and support is not available. In addition to cutting the AC position, you also plan on cutting funding to these programs by 20%. Programs are already underfunded, so some activities will have to be cut completely, and students will be burdened with the cost of activities that happen to survive. The decision will make it difficult for our most at-risk students to be able to afford to participate. Kids who are not in activities due to programs being cut will lose their incentive to keep their grades up, and the extras that make school fun will be lost. How can enrollment in our public schools grow if we are not investing in the things that draw kids into our schools? Multiple studies have proven that kids involved in school activities form better relationships, learn life lessons, are less likely to get pregnant, gain self-confidence, and are less likely to do drugs. When we make cuts from things that make our students overall healthier and happier people, the message received is that the school district doesn't care about our students' health and well-being. I hope you can find the extra money in our budget to change the message being sent out to the students who are our future leaders.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
Quick clarifying question. In terms of cuts to student activities, from your perspective, where do you have a sense of how what will wind up getting cut, or too early at this point?
Well, looking at the budget this year, we pretty much only had enough to cover coaches' contracts and a little bit of the other costs like officials and equipment that's needed to run like the bare minimum. So I would have to say that entire programs would have to be cut because we wouldn't have the money to pay an SAS contract for a coach.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Sarah Gillum. Just state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes.
Good evening, Sarah Gillum, Gillam, and I live in Fairbanks. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear testimony tonight. I have great respect for the board as you grapple with the budget shortfall this year, and I know that every single position and program cut impacts our school community and our students. Having been at West Valley for the past 6 years, I just wanted to share the reductions we are proposed to take next year and offer how I see those cuts impacting students. First, our biggest reduction is our staffing allocation as our PTR, or pupil teacher ratio, increases from 29.5 to 32. That reduction, along with our proposed decrease in enrollment, amounts to a cut of 7.4 FTE, or full-time equivalent positions, including our activities coordinator. Our schedules at the high school are driven by the course requests our students make. In fact, we start our registration process in January to ensure that we have accurate numbers to determine the courses and staffing needed for the upcoming school year. While I can wish and hope that course requests will come in neat even multiples of our PTR, or 32, that is never the case. Consequently, we have to make hard decisions around which courses we are going to be able to offer or how many sections of a course are built into the master schedule. For example, if we have 53 requests for a course, that is too many students to offer only one section. However, when we break it into 2 sections, the average PTR between the classes would only be 27. This lower PTR offering will then result in a higher PTR of, say, 37 in other classes to offset these smaller courses and reach the overall goal of 32. Additionally, our ability to offer what we call singleton classes is increasingly diminished. The impact is most often felt in our advanced placement courses and our elective courses. In music, of the 9 courses offered, only 2 had requests of at least 32 students this year. The other courses all had 20 or fewer. In previous years, I have been able to continue to support these courses with a lower PTR. However, just as the district has reached a point where hard decisions have to be made, we too are also having to make hard decisions. The music plan that will be presented tonight acknowledges the difficulties in maintaining strong secondary music programs. Without the district supporting FTE for music in middle and high schools, we will have to make reductions in staffing for music. Lathrop and West Valley have been collaborating with both administration and music teachers to be proactive and solution
That
focused.
is Thank you so much, Ms. Gillum. Mr. Doran?
Quick question. You mentioned in the past, recent years, with 29.5, you were able to do some things. If we were able to maintain 29.5, what we have this year, what anticipation would you have that impact in your planning?
Well, I think, I know for me, I think my entire FTE this year is only, I want to say right around 30, like 28 regular instruction and then 2 CT positions. So when you spread that out across all the students, it just really depends. But when you have a little bit more flexibility, and as Carly said, I mean, our class sizes can only fit so many students. So I think it just depends. And like you said, I mean, when we have a little bit more FTE with a smaller PTR, we can make maybe 20 students in a class work versus when we're aiming for 32, it's hard to be able to accommodate those smaller classes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we have John Sassman. If you will state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Okay, John Sassman, resident in Fairbanks. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the school board. Thank you for your service to our district. My name is John Sassman, and I'm currently an assistant principal at North Pole High School. I would like to address you on a personal and professional level tonight. I started my career in education here in Fairbanks. I was a student teacher at Pearl Creek Elementary School about 10 years ago. I went through UAF's post-bac program, finished my first master's in elementary education, and then my second in education leadership through UAA. I'm confident saying that I have been Alaska trained and experienced. I'm in the first third of my career, and I have some real momentum behind me and a passion for what I do. I'm here in front of you this evening because there's a serious and fundamental matter to discuss with you regarding our district and state: proper educational funding. In my tenure, I've never seen an increase to our annual budget, and I've only known cuts. Every year I've seen services and trained adults whittled down, and now we're tasked with cutting music, arts, and activities, including the coordinator position, only to have class sizes of 30+ kids. One of the most important messages I hear is that people want quality, consistency, and stability. How can we do that if our labor force are leaving at an alarming rate with little to no prospects replacing them faster than they go? In fact, I was tasked with lesson planning and grading 9th grade health classes, PE, and world history classes during the first semester because we didn't have anyone that applied for the positions. This was on top of my administrative duties and COVID contact tracing. We eventually hired back retired teachers, but that's not a sustainable model. My family and I have recently been presented with an option to relocate to another state on military orders. We are legitimately considering signing those papers and leaving this place, a place where my wife grew up. She's lived in Fairbanks for over 30 years. A place that our 3 little girls cherish and love their schools and friends. A place that I love to teach and connect with students but can no longer stand by and accept, well, we just don't have the funding. It's no longer an acceptable response. Please ask for more funding so we can run our schools properly. I ask this as a parent and an employee. I'm also asking the district to do more to attract and retain trained teachers and staff. I have a lot more, but I definitely ran out of time.
2 minutes is hard, I know. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate it. And if you would like, email the rest of your testimony to us. That would be wonderful.
Perfect.
Thank you. Erin Genoso. If you will come up, state your first name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Erin Genoso. My last name is spelled Janoso, and I live in Fairbanks. And I would like to begin my testimony tonight by speaking in support of the 6th through 12th grade music programs. Middle schools will be gaining an entire grade level of students, and as a consequence, the programs are gaining several more teachers, as they must. These extra teachers have to remain within the middle and high school programs, no matter what happens to elementary music. In her recent letter about music, Ms. Moline expressed that the district intends to offer quality music education across the district. Quality programs can only exist with adequate staffing. I would ask the board to please ensure that the budget that ends up getting passed includes nothing less than these nearly 13 full-time positions needed to adequately staff the 6th through 12th grade band and orchestra programs. Next, as we've been trying to understand various parts of the budget, looking for ways to save our elementary programs, I've reached out to a number of you. Thank you for those who have kindly taken their time to answer my queries. As you know, one area of inquiry has been around the alternative learning and homeschool expansion planned. I think I've since understood the answers to a number of my questions. For example, I believe the $230,000 increase homeschool allotment amount listed in the budget is required by the state. Is that correct? I hope this can be spoken to during the music part of the meeting agenda. There's still the additional $40,000 in marketing money in addition to the almost $10,000 budgeted for this past year, for a new total of $50,000. And then it appears there are 2 director positions budgeted for the singular alternative learning and programs department. Why? Most departments in this district have only 1 director. Reducing that to 1 here could recover $150,000, which could more than gain us back 1 elementary band or orchestra teacher, and 1 is a start. We'd also really like to know how much will the structural changes that need to happen to the Nordale building as a consequence of its repurposing cost? Who's paying for it? The borough, the district? And what of the additional $230,000 in supplies listed for the BEST program? Because in this time of less than $0, where schools are being closed and beloved programs slashed, the public cannot afford to proceed without knowing the answers to questions like these. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Genoso. Can we make sure that we get a copy of your questions about the budget and get those to Mr. DeGraw so we can make sure that we get all of those budget questions answered?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of
Yep,
course. Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Marati, did you have a question? No? All right, thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
That completes our public testimony. Next, we will move on to our agenda item C, fiscal year 2022-2023 budget discussion and work. Core values center everything we do on the student and student learning. This work will include music, special education, facilities, information systems and technology, consideration and discussion on possible board budget adjustments, work on developing the recommended budget. I'd like to turn the time over to administration.
Thank you, President Luke. I'd like to just begin our conversation this evening with a little bit of a clarification around our alternative learning systems. We've had several questions coming in about this, so just,
I apologize. Can I just go back one quick moment? Was there anyone else left in the audience who wanted to testify that did not get a chance to before the meeting started? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just a few clarifying things about what is in the proposed budget around our alternative learning systems. So first, we want to talk about e-learning and some of the staffing changes that appear in the proposed budget. The first one is the change of the 4 e-learning facilitators from certified positions to ESSA positions. And this was basically because of the job duties. They provide support for students that are taking online courses. So that means that the online teacher makes the syllabus, delivers the instruction, gives grades, and these positions act as support for students in their e-learning classes. So as we looked at those job duties, it really fell in line more with instructional aides that we have in other locations. So that was a shift in the staffing. The elementary e-learning structure will remain the same, and the 2 e-learning full-time e-learning secondary teachers are remaining in the proposed budget. And it's those teachers that teach PE and Alaska Studies. They're still in this budget. Another staffing adjustment that you'll find in the proposed budget is that of the MOUs that we've been offering to classroom teachers. So the way that that's been happening currently is if students wants to take a specific course like advanced level math or something like that, and it's not available within their schedule, then they can take it online. And so we do an MOU with a current teacher. So on top of their current teaching load, they teach this online course. So what we're looking at doing is transitioning to utilizing content providers. So this means we get more courses available for all students, and our students would have access to the entire catalog of Apex and Acillus courses. So they could take any of the courses that are a part of that provider's course list. And we only pay for the courses that the students take. And it actually comes out to being a lot more cost effective to run it this way. So in short, we get more options, we pay less money. So that was one of the staffing adjustments that is in the proposed budget. And then finally, this year, we had one e-learning coordinator that was exclusively responsible for e-learning students and their families. So what we've done is that we haven't added a coordinator, we've added duties to that coordinator's position. So the new title is Director of Virtual Learning and Best Homeschool. So we moved those best homeschool families and students to that e-learning coordinator. And the reason for this shift was that the duties and workload for the alternative learning systems director, Lori Beam, was not reasonable. With e-learning and BEST growing to the stage that they have and requiring more oversight and attention on top of charter schools and the additional requirements of charter schools, it just wasn't an equitable distribution of work. So we didn't add positions, we just shifted responsibilities in the area of e-learning and BEST. And then I want to talk just a little bit about our BEST homeschool program and some of the questions that have been coming up and hopefully add some clarity to some of the questions that have been coming in. So one of the questions is around BEST and being a net positive program and how that works and how the finances actually work. So the district does receive 90% of the BSA for each BEST student. So this is lower than we receive for our brick and mortar students, but the costs with BEST is significantly lower. And so in the current school year, the BEST program will generate almost $2 million in excess revenue for once all of its expenses are paid. So those excess revenues go into BEST, and then after that, it goes to support all the students across the district. Another question that's come up in a couple of conversations has been, why are we spending $600,000 on BEST? And that increase is approximately the allotments due because we have higher enrollment, so we have more students, they get more allotments, and so that ups the line item in the budget. As a part of the program, each student is allotted between $2,200 and $2,600 depending on the grade level, and that covers the various educational costs for that student and that family. Another really important thing to remember about BEST is that the student-teacher ratio for BEST students is 150 to one certified teacher, and in our brick and mortar classes, it's between 25 and 32. So that's a difference in PTR. So those are some of the things that have come up around BEST homeschool, and I'm sure there's probably more. So I thought I would just open up the conversation with answering some of the questions that have come in and addressing any others.
Ms. Marati?
It was mentioned tonight that the increased allotments are maybe required by state. Can you confirm or deny that?
I don't think there's a state statute that requires a minimum allotment. However, I will say, if we are going to be competitive in the homeschool market, then we need to stay competitive, and we weren't. So, but I don't believe, Mr. Minor, is there a state statute that requires an amount?
There is not. So I think you explained that correctly, and that the amount budgeted for allotments is consistent or congruent with the number of students we have enrolled. It is important to note that usually that budget line item isn't always expensed to the full amount because not all students use all of their allotments. But you do need a budget for it, just in the case that they do.
Ms. Marati?
Can you tell me two things? What's the projected enrollment for BEST for next year, and what are Raven and Ideas allotments?
I can't speak to Ravens and Ideas allotments today, but when we adjusted them in the same range as Idea and Raven to be competitive. And then Andy can speak to what BEST is budgeted off of.
Projected enrollment for BEST is 725.
Can I ask one more follow-up?
Go ahead.
What's the current enrollment right now?
The 20-day count number was 740.
Current number, 740?
20-day count, I don't have a current as of today number. The 20-day count at the end of October was 740.
Okay, so we're projecting to go down?
Yes, by 15.
Okay.
Ms. Matheson?
Mr. DeGraw, can you explain then why the jump in the homeschool or alternative programming?
Yes, thank you for that question, Ms. Matheson. So specifically, and these two areas have been asked consistently many times, and so we want to make sure this is very explicitly clear tonight. The $652,976 on page 177 of the budget, reporting unit 501, every dime of those expenditures are currently existing already in our current year budget. There is no increase. This is not an increase in any way, shape, or form in any position. These are existing positions and expenses that have been relocated from other parts of the budget here. Okay, so I just want that to be really clear for the public, and I think I'm answering some of the questions from a prior testimony. The other thing that, if I may, just address and just back up Ms. Maline's comments about the BEST program, the increased $600,000 in BEST budget amounts are directly due to increased allotments, anticipated allotments, due to the higher enrollment numbers. Okay, so we're not required by state statute to provide enrollments, but if we want to remain competitive with other homeschool programs in the community, we basically have to provide allotments. We have to provide competitive allotments. So we attach a percentage of expected utilization to overall students multiplied by those allotments, and we come up with a budgeted amount. And that budget amount is approximately $1.2 million based on the 725 students that we're projecting. That's roughly $460,000. The other little over $100,000 is, as someone, Ms. Moline referenced, an additional certified staff for BEST, and we staff that program at 150 students to 1. And so specifically for the community, for board members, the increased 600,000 approximate budgeted amount to BEST is due to those two things in large part.
Mrs. Smith? And then Mr. Doran.
Thank you. So just to be clear, when we made this $376,000 number that is in the budget book for the 21-22 school year, we simply had fewer students enrolled in the homeschool program. And the reason the number is higher is because our enrollment number is now higher, not because necessarily that we're greatly increasing the amount of money per student we're giving out, but it's just that we have so many more students than we had in this section of our budget last year.
That's correct, Ms. Smith. We're right-sizing the budgeted number with the amount of money we expect to go out by way of allotments this year.
And then I'll just add this information too, that we have 740 students enrolled in BEST as of now. So that's our current number.
Can you repeat that?
740 students enrolled currently in our BEST program.
Mrs. Smith?
Sure. And then I know that in this room we feel like we've been really clear about this, but clearly in the community there's some confusion. Is it? It's correct to say that investing in our homeschool program is basically our only option of generating any kind of revenue in addition to our normal revenue.
Ms. Smith, and from the 725 students that we expect to have in BEST, that will generate approximately $3.9 million in revenue, and the public can see the $2.1 million in anticipated expenditures. So I'll let the public deduce the numbers as they might.
Thank you.
Mr. Doran?
Okay, I've got two questions for clarification. One on the allocation, which is only due to, we're not increasing what we give right now as an allocation. Is that correct?
Correct.
It's by the numbers. Am I correct? We are about 200 students down this year in best enrollment versus the year before. So we're continuing to go down. So why are the allocations going up? We're now down significant amount.
Yes, that's a good question, Mr. Doran. The short answer is that we did not adjust budgeted allocations last year because of significant movement in best student numbers. Last year, it fluctuated at certain times significantly. And then as we were nearing the end of the budget cycle last season, the thought internally was that we were going to see a significant drop in best enrollment. I don't know if folks recall, there was a point in time during the summer that it was widely accepted that COVID was likely over with. And then the Delta variant reared its ugly head and it was back with a vengeance. I mean, this happened, really kind of towards the end of summer. And so we had significant questions during the budget cycle last year on where best enrollments were going to land, and we made the calculated decision to not adjust them in last year's budget cycle, to not have a wide fluctuation. So the short answer to your question is we did not adjust allotments last year, and we are now.
So we projected last year's budget for best at about that 300 number, or what was our?
The allotment budgeted line items reflected approximately a 300 student enrollment level.
Okay. The other question that I had in terms of the PTR, what I'm trying to get my head around is 150 to 1. We have high school students who are 150 to, and up from that to 180 to 1. And they are actually, and I don't want to dispute the level of work and the quality of work that people are doing, but very different. But we have high school teachers who have on their caseload 150 plus students, and they're doing the prep, the teaching, the corrections, the management, and all the other things you do as a teacher. I'm just trying to get that understanding of PTR.
So PTR is when we talk about that, it's around staffing. So X number of students get X number of teachers. So with high school, the staffing is around how many students you have, and in BEST, it's around how many students you have. And to your point of they're really two very different jobs, and they each have their own challenges. So a little bit of an apples and oranges when it comes to the job itself. But the staffing part of it is that if we have 300 students in BEST, that's 2 staff members. If we have 300 students in a high school, that's an entirely different number of staffing positions that we would allocate to that school. Is that helpful at all?
I hear the explanation. I do see an inequity there of what's considered work. So, but I will pursue that further. Thank you.
Mr. Meinert?
Yeah, sorry. They're working on leveling out my mic. I'm going to give it a little bit of time. Still pretty echoey. How about now? All right, I'm just going to keep talking and we'll deal with the echo. Along Ms. Moline's lines, I think it's important to note if you look at North Pole High as a comparative school, smaller school than what BEST is currently at, you're at around 23 certificated staff compared to BEST, which is around 5 certificated staff. And so what she's trying to explain is the way that we budget for teachers, which you understand, is based off of the PTR. So the PTR specifically, while high school teachers might have a caseload, the PTR and the budget, the way that we budget for teachers in high school is I mean, it's the same, but that for BEST, it's, we have significantly fewer staff, which allows us to run the program at a surplus of revenue.
Can I do a quick follow-up? And I will stop.
Go ahead, Mr.
Okay,
Dorn.
so for the time being, I'll do a private meeting. So in terms of the amount, we made $2 million this year in excess from the BEST program. Did I understand that correctly?
That's the projected revenue at this time.
Okay, and what do we project to make next year? If this budget goes the way it is?
So, Mr. Dorn, that's what I was referencing projected numbers, 3.9 million versus 2.1 million in expenditures. That's in the projected budget for FY23. I would have to look at current year numbers and find year to dates in order to get you figures on that.
Okay, we can talk about that Wednesday. Thanks.
Ms. Smith?
I'm just gonna let that go.
Okay.
So if we don't have any more questions around our alternative learning systems, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. LaPlante to give our music instruction.
We have one more question from Mr. Doran.
Okay.
Okay, just to that, not tonight, we will be coming back to this department at a future work session, is that correct?
We can come back to it whenever you'd like. We can discuss it further now. It's up to you, however you want to work through it. We don't have to go on to music. We can stay here, whatever is best for you.
If I might just make the request then that we come back to it specifically, I mean, because we didn't have it on our list tonight. We were trying to, at least I was trying to focus on what we have, make sure we get through those who are prepared tonight, but that we do come back to this alternative programs section. There are a number of
Certainly
questions.
revisit it tomorrow.
Absolutely. Ms. Matheson?
So my question is, we've got the 150 for homeschooling, right? And that's considered a caseload, right? And then for high school, we've got 25-ish PTR to 30, which if they're teaching 5 classrooms, isn't that the same caseload?
It is. So the caseload itself for the work, that's what we were trying to get at for BEST teachers, is that it would be a similar caseload or similar work environment for them, for our Fairbanks teachers. What's different is the way that it's budgeted, and Mr. DeGraw can probably speak to that much more eloquently than I can, but I was giving the example. North Pole High School, smaller high school, has over 20 certificated staff members. BEST Homeschool, bigger school, only has 5 certificated staff members. So you can see that there's a significant difference in staffing, and that's where the revenue comes into play and allows BEST to generate revenue for our school district.
And an important, back to Mr. Doran's comments, they're very different kinds of jobs because like at North Pole High School, those teachers are expected to deliver the instruction, make the lesson plans, develop the syllabus, all of those kinds of things. A very different job than a homeschool homeschool teacher who supports the families because it's the families that are delivering the instruction. So one of the differences in our BEST homeschool programs, and all homeschool programs for that matter, is the delivery of instruction. So in our homeschool program, it's the parents or the families that deliver the instruction. In our e-learning programs in elementary, it's a Fairbanks North Star Borough School District teacher that delivers instruction on a different platform. And then in our brick and mortar schools, it's the teacher that delivers the instruction, makes the lesson plans, and does that part of it. So it's really very different jobs when you break it down into responsibilities. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's a little bit of the difference in how these different programs work and how they're different than our brick and mortar schools.
Thank you so much. And if we could just, as Mr. Doran requested, maybe start off with this again tomorrow night
Absolutely.
with the alternative programs, so he can have a day with questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And that was one of the reasons I wanted to kind of crack the egg open today, is to give us some time to talk about it and then bring it up later. So with that, I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent LaPlante to talk about the music part of our budget.
Thank you very much. So when we talk about music, I haven't met a single person who doesn't appreciate music, doesn't value music, doesn't want music experiences and instruction for our students. We all want that. We are all trying to make the best use of the resources we have to have the best impact for our students. As I look at the budget and where we've been, like Mr. Sassman said, over the last 10 years and even beyond that, I begin to think about something we probably haven't thought in a long time. I was thinking about what Dr. Phil used to say, and it was sort of novel at the time, like, how is that working for you? And what we have is a music program that we have been chipping away at, and then we're wondering why it's not having the results that we want. We wonder why fewer students at the high school are asking for music programs. And I'm going to tell you why I think that that's happening and what our opportunity for a solution is. We have put a lot of effort over the years in providing an opportunity for those who choose to take 4th or 5th or 6th grade band and orchestra. And that has looked like an itinerant teacher traveling originally to like 3 schools and now as many as 5 to 6 schools. So we're using a lot of that teacher's time in travel, but to go to those schools and pull students out of their core classes or whatever they happen to be in at the time, because I'm only going to be here for this portion of the day, now's your time, and give them a beautiful opportunity to have either band instruction or music instruction. Right now, we are currently providing that opportunity to 5th and 6th grade students, and on average at schools that have a robust program, we have about 22 students in a band program and about 24 students in an orchestra program. District-wide, it's more like 17 students if you kind of average it out. Most of the schools, when I ask the principals and teachers to kind of say how many students they have currently, and that's 5th and 6th grade, currently have about 16 or 17 students taking one or the other of those, which amounts to, it's not as many students as we would like it to be, right? It's not as many students as we know we have in our 5th and 6th grade. So we do that, and then when they get to middle school, the current model has middle school students have access to, they have PE and health, they have their language arts English class, they have science, social studies, they have math and language arts, and then they get maybe one additional elective. And that one additional elective, it could be broken down by quarter or semester or the year. And if they choose band or orchestra, that's probably, at least a semester or maybe even a year-long choice, and that's the one choice they get. And so some students do that all year, but some students want to take this opportunity in middle school to try out some of the other electives that they now have access to. And they don't end up taking 2 full years of band or 2 full years of orchestra. And so when they go into the high school, they haven't been taking that, and they're less likely to take it when they get to high school. And so over the years, we've seen a decline in what we're able to offer at the high school levels. We're not creating that nice big pipeline of music instruction from the elementary through the middle school to the high schools. And so our high school programs have been declining. And so you have a slow attrition that's happening where the fewer students that ask for those courses, the fewer FTEs the principals can allot to those programs, and so the programs slowly get shrunk and shrunk and shrunk through no intention on our part. It's just how it happens. With the influx of the 6th grade students going to the middle school, I see this as the perfect opportunity not only to create more robust options for all middle-aged students, middle school students to take STEM and technology and video production and art classes, but also to take music classes and to not have it be a forced choice, to not have to choose, do I do ELP or band? Do I do STEM or orchestra, to be able to say you can do both. You could have something that you do this quarter, you could have 4 quarters of electives and still take a full year of instrumental music or choral music or jazz music and have those taught by instructors that have that as their specialty. So I concur with the high school principals that were here and what many of our band and orchestra and instrumental music teachers are saying, that if you really want to grow and solidify our program here in the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District, now is the time to take what resources we have and put them at the middle school and the high schools to solidify that program. If we then do that, we could potentially put 2 additional teachers, 1 band specialist and 1 orchestra specialist, with the sole focus of spending fall semester visiting middle schools and providing some one-on-one instruction, some small group instruction to get new students kind of over the hump of learning a new instrument and giving them some specialized instruction. And then at the second semester, focus on joining the general music teachers at the elementary schools to give those students a couple weeks exposure to band instruments and to orchestra instruments, so they get familiar with those and they can make an informed choice because they've experienced it at their 5th grade level. And then they would see those same specialists helping them become students of instrumental music when they get to 6th grade. So it would create that pipeline. The other thing that we would be doing is we would have more of our feeder schools, like at the middle schools and the high schools, would be able to be partnered up, so they'd see the same instructors in middle school that they might see in high school more often, and that is known to strengthen programs. So that's what we're proposing. In order to do that, it requires taking some of the FTE that has been given to the high schools and the middle schools just as part of their FTE allotment. And then they have to make those difficult choices of how much of that FTE do I provide to music programs or fine art programs in general. And they can, so if I get 1 FTE and I only have enough students asking for band or orchestra or choir to allot 0.6 of that FTE, that's all I'm going to do. Whereas if they give that 0.6 back to the district and we group it as a district-wide FTE, I can amass enough to spread in a different way. Like we can, at the middle schools and high schools, we can use that FTE more efficiently if we group it together rather than if we give it as a little tiny allotment here and a little tiny allotment there. So that is our proposal, is to sort of borrow back from the high schools and middle schools to about 7.5 FTE. We have 3 FTE already built into our proposed budget, and then the addition of 3 FTE would give us 13.5, and we could do all of the middle school and all of the high school at a more robust level. And then if you want to put the cherry on top, just 2 more for the band and orchestra specialists for each semester.
Ms. Matheson, Ms. Smith, Mr. Doran.
Mrs. LaPont, you were saying that that right now our middle schoolers can only do they only have room for 1 elective.
So that's 1 elective per quarter. Some electives are quarter-based, some are semester-based, and some you kind of choose it all year. I think one of the best examples is ELP. A lot of kids go in and their parents want them to take an ELP or a STEM class, and if they take that for a whole semester, which would be kind of the ideal, they don't get, that's it, that's the one they do. I think that Mr. Meinert could talk a little bit more. I think maybe North Pole Middle School and maybe Tanana are able to offer a little bit more because they're some of the larger schools, but currently our smaller middle schools are really tight in how much they can offer in the electives.
Right, but if they only get the 1, and we're proposing to take away
we would be adding, we would be adding enough FTE so they would be able to offer 2. So what our proposal is, we're adding back through district-wide allocation. We're basically subsidizing back to the schools so they could have more FTE.
Right, but they can only take 1 elective.
They would be able to take 2.
So we're adding a 7th period?
I don't know that it's important to get lost in the details of individual school schedules. There are schools that have offered 2 electives for students, and there's some schools that only offer 1. But I think where she's going with the music portion is that it allows students, if they want to do music at the schools that do have 2 elective offerings, which we're trying to get to with all of our middle schools, that they would be able to do that and then do that at a really high level, along with getting to take advantage of some other elective options.
Next, we have Ms. Smith, Mr. Dorn, and I put myself in the queue.
Okay. I was really listening to what you said, but I just need to clarify. What is the total number of this district-wide FTE that you're asking for?
My ask right now would be 3 to provide the program that we're trying to design for middle and high school. If you want to add more, it would be just 2 more, so the total ask would be 5. There's already 3 FTE budgeted into our current budget. That's the 2.8 plus the 0.2 through CARES. That's already in the proposed budget. So in addition to that, it would be 3, or as an option, 5.
So the schools would still have their music teachers?
The elementary schools?
Yes, because you
Absolutely.
said like, okay, that would be 13 teachers.
We would not be touching any of the elementary school
So you
general
would just
music teachers.
create a district-wide supplement to their programs.
Yeah, we would not be offering, to be very clear, we would not be proposing to offer band and orchestra as a full year experience at 5th grade across the district. That would not be happening. An exposure to the instruments so that they could make an informed choice when they went to middle school, I would love to be able to offer that.
I just have one more follow-up, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Okay, so I'm starting to feel that I can get behind this program. I understand it. However, our last meeting, we heard a lot of testimony from elementary band and orchestra educators who said that you have to have it in elementary school. And I just want to make sure that this is not all about money, and this is not all about administrators forcing this decision onto the educators. And I'm interested in who was on your team to make this decision. And I want to make sure that there were plenty of music educators who think this is a good decision.
So if given the choice of introducing students in the elementary school to band and orchestra and then limiting their options to continue with that education at the middle school, the music teachers would say, we would rather have 3 full years of music instruction, solid 3 full years, and the music instruction at the middle school could be 4 days a week for an average of 50 minutes all year long versus 2 30-minute sessions, maybe 40-minute sessions if you add in some recess time at the elementary school. So it's a much more robust, solid introduction to music. With that, there's absolutely an understanding, and that's why we talked about what could we do at the 5th grade to introduce students to the instrumental music programs. We already have a music curriculum that is designed to bring students along. They have recorder in 3rd grade, they do drums, they do rhythm, they're reading music, they're preparing themselves for instrumental music or for choral music. That's part of the elementary general music curriculum, and we would be able to add in something at the 5th grade level, and I would say potentially do something that could be grown, but I think it's important that it happens as part of their general music time, so it's not a pullout, because we have a lot to cover in our core classes as well.
And I would just add to that conversation about who was a part of this decision, and I'll just relate a conversation that I had with an elementary music teacher who is teaching instrumental music and is the general music teacher. And his experience is he's taught in several different states across the country, a number of different types of settings, and generally in the lower 48, what they have gone to is this kind of a model, to where you have a really strong middle school instrumental program, and the point of the K-5 instruction time is to introduce them to music. Like, how to read music, how does music work, that sort of thing. And he went on to say that what they found is introducing music in the elementary schools they didn't find to be that advantageous. What was more advantageous is really building up that middle school model. So especially if you had 3 years with them. If you have 3 solid years, they found that to be much more successful in creating musicians that then go on for those coveted scholarships and even make it, a lifelong hobby if they don't go into it professionally. So that was a conversation that I had with a particular educator that's taught around the country in several different settings. So it seems to be kind of a model that's followed and works for music teachers.
Thank you. And to add on to that, so we have been consulting with the music teachers, and in fact, they had a fairly large meeting this weekend. I, there's a variety of music teachers that have been involved in that, and in some ways, I've been using Liesl Whitgriff, who's an administrator in the position, in her current position as an AP at West Valley, but prior to that was a music teacher in our district, and she's kind of been helping that bridge. And so I know she's reached out personally to a larger group than I've had time to personally reach out to this particular year. And so I'm working on some of the feedback that group has provided, and especially getting into high school scheduling. I've told the group, I said, I get it conceptually, but I can't explain it as well as they can, or as well as like the principals that were here can. So this is definitely building off of their proposals.
Mr. Dorn?
Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you for a plan. That's really helpful. And the one thing I would say is it'd be great if maybe we can get it written out also. I think that helps. But a couple of questions. You mentioned this is dependent on 3 additional positions or maintaining those positions. And I guess my question is reference in where did they show up the budget? There were 3 in the CARES 2-3 recommendations, which are, my understanding is not in the recommended budget. Am I correct? And let me put the other second part of it, because then you said if the board decided to add 2, then that would need to come from, am I understanding those would come from someplace else?
So I'm going to say what I can, and then Andy will help me out here. So in the proposed budget, without any changes to it, there are 2.8 in the regular funding, and then I think there was an addition, a suggestion of 0.2 out of CARES. Is that correct, Mr. DeGraw?
Yes, and you would refer to the sheet in the packet titled CARES Revised Budget, and that's the 3.0 music FTE found in that.
Okay, so there are no music in here.
No district-wide music that we're talking about. It's the 3.0 in the CARES revised budget.
Okay, so the 2 that you referenced then to provide this itinerant piece.
They're not identified anywhere in the budget right now.
They are nowhere in the budget. Though that would be we would have to come up with $250,000 roughly for 2 teachers. Okay. And the 3 are in CARES. There's no music, no band orchestra. Okay. And if I understood correctly, the FTE reductions that the high schools are given right now in their total staff, which then impact if they have someone available for band orchestra or choir, did I understand pulling together, which makes sense to me, and we've done that before where there've been multiple schools. They would get an additional are they losing that FTE? Because that's really being pulled back, some which they could use other than in music, if that was the demand of the students. I'm just trying to get that balance.
So, for example, currently across the middle schools and high schools, out of the full allotment of FTE that the middle schools and high schools have gotten, 9.9 of them have been utilized to support music in some fashion. So we would be borrowing from the music allocations at the middle schools and high schools to try to be more efficient and try to cover more territory with a similar amount.
Okay. Okay. And I had one other question, if I might. Okay. In terms of just understanding the logistics a little bit for if we added beyond the CARES recommendations and the proposed budget, those two teachers would provide this itinerant fall helping in the middle school, spring working in the elementaries. Logistically, having tried to do band orchestra schedules in the elementary, it has pros and cons. I mean, the exposure and what the kids get versus, also trying to figure out where they're pulled and balancing that between schools. In your conversation with principals and music teachers, that's doable?
That would be doable. With by having 16 schools, the math is a little simpler. So it divides up nice and evenly into quarters and semesters and such. So we would be able to have two teachers, one specialist in band and one specialist in orchestra would be ideal. And they would partner up with the music teachers. It would be as simple as saying these 4 or 5 schools are going to be on a similar rotation. So half of you need to have your 5th grade specials in the morning and half of you need to have your 5th grade specials in the afternoon. As long as they do that, it would all work out. So I could just identify which schools are going to be 5th grade has to be in the morning and 5th grade has to be in the afternoon so that one person could be a morning spot here and an afternoon spot there. What it would do is by infusing it into the general music program, you wouldn't have be trying to fight the pull-out system. I think that we need to get away from that. That has been, we've been asking people who want to provide really good services to kids to fight over the opportunity of when to do that, and that's not really helpful to anybody.
So that would get incorporated into their general music?
Yes.
So that they would, okay. And then just a labor question. We put band orchestra together. Do we have the band teachers and the orchestra teachers? I know you've been faced with this particularly the last couple of years, but do we have that?
I think we would be able to staff what we're asking for here. I think if we started to try to rebuild an entire itinerant program that was going to service all the elementary schools, that we would begin to have difficulty doing that, and we would be taking away from allocations and taking away from the people who would do the work at the middle schools and high schools. So we can't really ask for both at the same time right now. I believe that if we go with this model, we retain the opportunity to grow back something that works for the elementary schools as an introductory piece. We would be kind of keeping a pinky toe in the water with just the 5th grade during their general music time. We could keep that in there. If that worked out well, we might be able to grow that a little bit.
Thank you.
I did have the question about where this would be in the budget, but you already explained that. My other question is, with Ladd and Barnett, because they are the K-8 model, how would that fit in with that?
So they would either be built into the rotations that we have with the middle schools, or they could be covered potentially by the 2 itinerant teachers if we end up adding on that particular element.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Marati.
I have heard repeatedly that band and orchestra, the band and orchestra situation is only a choice of either elementary or secondary. But I'd like to listen to the community that testified recently and see what it would look like to have both a robust elementary and an orchestra experience and a sustainable secondary band and orchestra offering. It seems like we're being offered a pie situation right now, and pitting elementary against secondary. But our community wants to see a whole district successful, and so I'd like to see what that would look like.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith and then Ms. Matheson.
Thank you. I've been supporting the music program, but I really am hearing what's being said. And I just have really pored over the budget and struggled with some questions. The community is always accusing us of making inflammatory cuts so that they come running and then beg us for money, right? And I'm just unclear why certain other positions that I see as easily going to district-wide or being combined are not addressed. And I have been greatly resisting bringing them up because I feel like I've got to be missing something as to why we have um, so many FTE librarians, which seems like before art and before music, we could reduce the FTEs for librarian to district-wide because they all also have support staff that are in the libraries. And all the elementary schools are doing with only support staff. And I don't understand why we can't have one district-wide librarian with support staff in the libraries. And I'd like that to be seriously considered because it's quite a lot of FTEs that could easily transfer to well support the music program, which are teachers in the classroom teaching students a skill that the community has outcried is necessary for their development. So I'm interested to understand why, all of the schools have attendance secretaries, but we pay a lot of money for all of these IT solutions to our attendants. I just got 3 robocalls on my phone from our automated attendance system. I'm sure I just need to meet with someone to have it explained to me why we also have dozens and dozens of attendance secretaries. It's nothing personal, but these just seem like much more obvious, but less inflammatory cuts that we have to look at. Last year we were sitting here saying, why can't we vacuum the floors every other day and save some, I'll ask that question when we get to the FMD presentation. But it just seems crazy to me that we're sitting here talking about cutting an entire program, reducing entire programs, and there's people in our schools every day who are not teaching students, and we need to find efficiencies in those positions. And I'm just wondering am I missing something? Do we have to by law have these things? Because if we don't, I'd like them to be on the table.
We can certainly look into what that would look like and budgetarily both. So if I'm hearing the 2 questions from Ms. Marati, what would it look like to have a band and orchestra elementary program that goes all the way through high school? Is that your question?
Yeah, so what we had when we had it for 4th and 5th and the district-wide.
Okay, so 4th and 5th not itinerant, or 4th and 5th itinerant. Are you talking about the model that we're coming from that had itinerant teachers, or are we talking about what it would cost to have a band and orchestra teacher at an elementary school all the time?
May I ask Ms. LaPlante through
Go
the
right ahead.
chair? What did we have before last year when we cut it down to 5th grade only?
So prior to COVID, we offered itinerant teachers to serve band and orchestra to 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students. And over the years that I had been aware of it, that had been cut from about 13 teachers trying to serve, 2 or 3 schools, and it was cut to 9 teachers, and then it was cut to 6 or 7 teachers, and now we're down to 3. And so it's been trimmed and trimmed and trimmed and trimmed. And so I don't know to what level you would want it returned back to, whether we want 13 teachers in that, and that's doubling what we're asking for. But that's when it was working the best, but it's been quite a while since we've been there because we've been cutting pretty much every year. So I guess I would have to know what we're trying to return to.
Maybe you could provide us options.
Yeah. So for example, if I may, like at many elementary schools, they try to have an uninterrupted core block instruction time for math and language arts. And our current model does not allow for anything to be uninterrupted. Everything is at, like, when the teacher shows up, that's when they get pulled out. So they might be missing math, they might be missing special education, they might be missing ELP, they might be missing science. Just doesn't, there's not enough flexibility to tailor it to what's going on at the school or instructionally. So that's been a difficulty for trying to make up the ground that we need to try to make up for students academically. In order to avoid that, we would need more teachers so that you could have a little bit more flexibility.
So is that the program that you're wanting to look into?
Through the chair, it's not solely up to me, but if I could receive information on what it would look like, I would say since we're 6th graders are moving to middle school, then we're just looking at 4th and 5th, and we were able to do it last year, not the best way, with 3. So to add maybe an additional 5 FTE for district-wide itinerant teachers to provide band and orchestra to 4th and 5th grades.
Okay, so I understand your ask. And then Ms. Smith, your ask is for what would it look like to have a district-wide high school librarian that services the high schools and then support staff run the day-to-day operations? Am I understanding that correctly?
I would just call it secondary. I mean, there's middle school librarians.
Oh, okay, so middle and high
there's
school,
quite a lot of
okay.
them. And it's just something that I don't understand. They don't teach classes. So we need people to teach classes. We need to put our funds into positions that are meeting our direct educational goals. That is my opinion.
Okay, so we can look into those two situations.
Now we have Miss Matheson and then Mr. Doran.
I just wanted to piggyback on Mrs. Marati's suggestion. I'd like to see that with the 4th graders. And how many times a week are we pulling them out for music? For instrumental music?
For instrumental music, the idea has been to provide 2 lessons a week. And I think sometimes there was trying to do small, the idea would be like one that's a small group specialized instruction and then one that's a little bit larger group. And then as they progress further into the year and have more ability, they can maybe meet twice with a kind of a larger group. I know that right now, in order to get everything scheduled, almost all the teachers are having to do all their beginning classes with a larger group. And the other way that we're piecing this together right now is we're having many, our general music teachers at the elementary level are teaching either a band class or an orchestra class, which has, again, made the schedules at the elementary school very, very tight. And I don't know that as we have increased some of our elementary schools and as we foresee increasing them, if we get students back, the flexibility will not continue to be there for general music teachers to pick up that part. And that's how we were able to reduce FTE out of the district-wide, is by asking our general music teachers to do more, and I worry about that.
I would also like to see, how many did you ask for, Mrs. Marati, for 5? I'd like to see a budget with 5 FTE for music. And if we can look at what those cuts might be so that we can supply the music teachers, that would be lovely.
Mr. DeGraw?
So just to provide a general response and just to kind of provide some context and food for thought as we're talking about this and other topics of adding back. So as we transitioned from the scenario A proposed budget to the scenario B proposed budget, which B is now just the proposed revised. It's our proposed budget now. We had to go in and find $3 million in additional cuts. And that was, for me and Ms. Moline, an extremely difficult process. And I think people noticed probably that we started to cut into core classroom functions. And so the debate as we add back is going to be, do we increase our CARES utilization or do we cut further into the general fund? It's simple. It's not complicated. And so just food for thought as we're talking about add back. So 5 teachers, we're looking at approximately $600,000. And that's the debate. It's, do we increase our CARES utilization from 10.5 million where it is at currently, or do we cut additional general fund expenditures, which, as you can see, we're getting into kindergarten teacher aides, we're getting into assistant principals, counselors, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think I have any solutions here. I'm just, providing some context and food for thought for board members as we navigate the process, so.
We're gonna go into Mr. Doran, and then I was in the queue, Ms. Smith, and then Ms. Matheson.
Okay, you ready for me? Okay, thank you. So that I understand this, and I will say I like the plan. I think it's making lemonade out of some lemons. We are short on money. We're short on qualified teachers, is what I understand the situation. This plan, and that's where keeping CARES over here and the proposed budget over here, they're married, because just even this plan, it depends, I want to make sure I understand, it does depend on the CARES funding of 3 district-wide music teachers. Then there's an additional 2 is that an administrative recommendation that we look at finding where to fund those additional 2? And do you have recommendations at this point for where that would come out of at this point based on the administrative recommendation?
Right, at this point, in our proposed budget is what we're proposing. What Ms. LaPlante was talking about is in reference to the conversation that we had earlier at a work session about building up that elementary school instrumental music, and these itinerant folks would help do that. So at this point, our recommendation is still moving with the plan that we have in our proposed budget.
Without I'm sorry, follow up if I can.
Go ahead.
Okay, so it's the 3, what did you say, 2.8 in here?
Right.
And it's 3 full FTs, and the CARES, they're married, they go hand in hand. That's what your proposal is, or recommendation is. The extra 2 to help at middle and second semester, 5th, would have to come out of something else, and you don't have anything at this time.
Right.
I mean, I know things are developing.
Right, we're kind of addressing the conversation earlier about elementary band and orchestra. Ms. LaPlante, do you have something to add?
I think we're not talking about it the same. And I think what we should do is allow me to put it together in a place that we can write it out and see it all, and then I think it'll become more clear. It's difficult for me, it's almost emotional for me to sit here and say, it's okay for us to close 3 elementary schools to save $3 million, but it's okay to then turn around and spend $3 million to put back music programs that are not getting at what we need to do. I feel like that is absolutely unfair to our community, that we will be willing to make very difficult choices in certain situations, but not make equally difficult choices in other situations. And I just can't not say that.
Thank you.
With the recommendation, I would really appreciate it. I think that would be really great if we could just have it spelled out, because I think that would answer a lot of our questions. And one of the things that I think I was just going to reiterate that has been brought up is that we're, one, having a hard time finding educators who are qualified to be able to fill all of the positions in which we are discussing tonight. And two, this is a model that the lower 48, that many other school districts, many other places have moved to, because it is more effective and is more efficient in ensuring that our secondary schools, i.e. our high schoolers, have the opportunity to get a more in-depth, robust program to be qualified for scholarships, going into college, continuing with their music education. And so that's kind of the takeaway that I'm getting from Ms. LaPlante and Ms. Moline, is that we're having an issue finding qualified educators to fill these positions, and two, this will be more robust to ensure that we are giving our students and our community a more robust, in-depth opportunity of music offerings. And due to respect of time and the fact that I know that we still have a lot of other items on our agenda, if we could have Ms. LaPlante write out the program that is being suggested and send that to the board, and we can continue having more of that robust conversation. But I think that that is a really big thing that we need to consider and, in my opinion, look at. Why are other districts moving to this type of model, even if it's not tied to budget constraints, and that it's being effective and efficient? So I think that's kind of where I want to leave it. And if that's okay, I know we have a couple more comments, but I really want to make sure that we give Ms. LaPlante the opportunity to put everything out in front of us, rather than just kind of spinning our wheels tonight, so that we can have more of that conversation in the future, and move on to, I believe it's special education, Ms. Moline? Okay.
Yes, our special education department presentation. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Coriel and Ms. Hall.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak about our department, and we have a short presentation, then we'll be available for any questions or comments. Again, this is, next to me is Kate Hall. She's the Assistant Director of Special Education. We have a very complicated budget. We have, with grant positions, we have over 400 positions in our school district. Budget, obviously, a good portion of the budget, and the moving parts are pretty much endless, and recently they're more than endless. So lots of moving parts these days. So our mission as a special education department is we are committed to reversing the trend of isolation and segregation of students with disabilities by ensuring all students have access to high quality instruction that is responsive to their needs, delivered by effective and culturally responsive educators within the least restrictive environment. Our primary focus is to build capacity and to support staff members district-wide to ensure effective instruction is the predictor of student outcomes. So that's kind of what we work under. Quick department facts. Right now, we're serving approximately 2,300 students. Our special education school teams, along with parents, conduct approximately 3,000 student-driven meetings and approximately 1,000 student evaluations per year. So again, the scope is pretty large. We provide support in every district school, including schools of choice, the best homeschool program, students who are homebound on homebound status who can't attend school based on their unique medical needs. We also work closely with other community agencies to provide support for children in alternate settings. That includes students in residential or therapeutic settings and students placed in correctional facilities. So this is some data trends. These are the February 1st of the years here listed. How many students do we have enrolled with IEPs? So as you can see, February 2019, about almost 2,400. What I'll tell you is with the exception of the last couple of years, 2,400 has been, pretty flat. That's been about what we've been serving over. Again, it fluctuates a little bit, but as you can see, February 2020, 2,379. Of course, February 2021, we had a huge dip. In February, we were at 2,129. We had a low of 2,098 at the beginning of the 2021 school year, or the 21-22 school year. No, I'm sorry, 2021. So down to 2098. So we lost approximately 300 students with IEPs during that primary COVID year. And again, our numbers have risen back. Again, February 1st of 2022, 2,299 students. So our numbers have increased, and I would expect, hopefully for various reasons, I would hope that a lot of that has to do with students who are in homeschools, that parents know that this is where they can get quality services, which not that homeschools cannot provide good services, but sometimes students need that direct instruction, which doesn't necessarily occur at the level we can provide in other homeschools. Just to note here is that, again, we dipped down to 2,098 over that consistent number. Just kind of general staffing, I know in the SPED district office, in 2013, we had 7 allocations of administrative support, and then we're down to 4 positions supporting admin support in our department. Also point out that in the February 2020, prior to COVID, our total positions were 380.9. So again, we took a huge drop. A lot of that was brought back with COVID, and then with today's numbers in hard budget, it brings us to about 356 with those CARES positions back in the budget. As you can see by our pie chart, is that people make the difference in our department. 92% of our budget is dedicated to the staff providing critical services and supports to students. And again, you could argue that it's even more. Basic staffing and 91%. When you look at our other staffing, that is to provide subs for so teachers can have professional development. This is to bring in retiree hires to support our department when we need extra support. So basically, that is looking at staffing as well. Another big chunk of our budget is the purchase services. A good portion of that is our contract with FCSA. So, on paper it looks like a contract, but what that's funding is a secondary and an elementary separate day school and the residential treatment program, at least the academic portions of that program. So again, on paper it looks like a contract, but that contract is paying to educate those students in those programs as well. Revenue sources, intensive funding. That's state funding that is provided to support our most impacted students. So we go through a process every year to identify students who receive intensive funding. It's a 13 times multiplier for the base student allotment. So our approved claims with the state this year will bring in approximately $29 million. Medicaid reimbursement. Some services are provided to eligible students by related service providers are eligible for reimbursement. To date, in FY22, revenue is about $200,000. I would expect that, again, to approximately double by the end of the school year. I would expect that in the future, hopefully, to increase. A year and a half ago, everything in the world happened at the same time. We dropped our Goalview program, which was our IEP program. They were about to shut down, so now we have Power School special programs. At the same time, Goalview stopped doing Medicaid billing. So without any notice, we had no Medicaid billing provider. So there was some delay. We have a good program now going with C's, and so that is improving. So hopefully that will be a continued little. Again, doesn't add up to a lot, but every little bit counts, and we hope to get approximately $400,000 this year. We also have grant funds. The district receives pass-through funds from the federal government, and then that's distributed by the state of Alaska. It's important to note, like all of the grants are intended to supplement, not supplant local funding. So we can't take positions out of the budget and then pay for them with grant funds. So this is for when we have students' unexpected needs, need for equipment, students in residential treatment centers, et cetera, or out of state. That helps supplement those without impacting our ability to use our hard budget to serve students. So our 6B grant, our award this year was $3,474,000. Our 619 preschool grant, $123,000. Something very important to SPED funding is something called maintenance of effort. So at the local level, IDEA, that's the law that governs special education, requires that LEAs, that's the local education agency, that's us, to receive those Part B funds, which is that grant funding, is you have to year to year spend a relatively equivalent amount on students. So if you have a certain amount of funding for students, next year you have the same amount of students, you can't back the budget way off without potentially losing those federal grant funds. So a pretty simple overview with a lot of complications with, again, with the moving parts in our department and budget. So we will happily answer any questions that you guys have.
Ms. Matheson and then Ms. Smith.
Thank you. So on the revenue sources, you said that we get Medicaid reimbursement.
Yes.
Is Medicaid the only insurance that will reimburse, or are there other insurances that we can? And if we can, do we?
Yeah. Medicaid is the only program that will reimburse for services provided in school districts. So we cannot accept any private insurance. The Medicaid billing that we do doesn't impact a child's services and supports outside of the school district. It's just something the federal government does to offset some of the costs of providing direct occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, et cetera.
Go ahead, Ms. Matheson.
You said that we cannot bill any other insurance?
No, we cannot. No. And some districts is because of the overhead cost, thankfully with C's, there's still work involved for our providers. They have to document correctly, so we're doing everything legally to get the reimbursement. But some districts don't even bill for Medicaid because of the overhead costs of administering to get the funding does not surpass what they're spending on getting the funding, if that makes sense.
I still don't understand why we can't bill anyone else.
That's based on federal law.
Okay.
Yeah, that's we are not private medical providers. So, for example, our contract with FCSA, they have services that they can bill that they do outside of what they're doing with our students. They're a private provider and they can bill insurance. But for us, it's just something the government has put in place to say we know it's expensive to provide direct OT services for et cetera. So they'll do some reimbursement, and we have to split the reimbursement with the state of Alaska. So our $200,000 is actually that we've billed $400,000. So the state takes half off the top. So I would expect hopefully we will bill $800,000, but we, you know, we don't get the choice of keeping the other half. They take it.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. I, I always talk about my special ed daughter, and for a while, my daughter was homeschooled, and she didn't get, special ed services. She actually was never totally homeschooled. She was half enrolled in Midnight Sun and in another program, and I was just curious as to whether having space in a building would allow us to possibly provide services for some of our homeschool students that building-based students are getting.
Yeah, I'm going to let Kate take over a little bit, but what I would say is, as far as providing services on a grand scale where students have resource and other supports, my thought is that would just cause a glut and a nightmare. But I think that we could probably provide some related services, and we have talked about that.
Yeah, just to clarify, like the related services, what I'm talking about, like kids could come and receive speech therapy, which I know like some probably do from outside programs. Is that true?
Yeah, and so related services are things like speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. And for students who are not at a brick and mortar school for us, so we serve students we're required to serve students that are in private schools locally. In some cases, we have cooperative agreements with other homeschool programs, not many at this point. And then our best homeschool students, we're obviously responsible for their special education. At this time, those students are served within their neighborhood school, and parents can choose to take advantage of that or not. I agree with you that I think having a facility opens up some interesting opportunities for those therapies. What becomes challenging is staffing that at this point. And so I would say that we have a lot of difficult positions to fill, but amongst our most difficult historically are our speech therapists, which is an extraordinarily popular service for students who are in homeschools. And I would say the folks that we have come into their neighborhood school for direct services, the bulk of those would be students who receive speech. I think it's something that's very worth investigating as a possibility, and some of that will depend on our ability to staff that, not just with the financial part of the position, but actually being able to hire that as well.
Ms. Marati?
Under the budget, in the book, page 147, for SPED for purchase services, professional and technical services, the SPED instruction decreased by 150,000, but the note didn't change from the prior year. So I can't tell what caused the decrease.
That is based on a negotiated decrease in our contract with FCSA. So between last year's budget, under that line, it said it was approximately $1.895 million. So it's right now $1.745 million. That's the decrease in our contract. So they are providing the same services, but we negotiated a decrease in our contract.
Mr. Doran?
Thank you. On page 145 with the bridge program, I have two questions. One, I assume that staffing is included, though it's not identified as bridge, but it's included in the staffing list of general positions. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's under our secondary special education. They're lumped all together, but yes, sir. That's none of the bridge staffing is on this particular page. It's just for facilities, for the rent, basically.
And that's zeroed out.
Yes, sir.
So where do we stand with that, or do we have to?
I know I will let Mr. DeGraw, goodness gracious, sorry, Mr. DeGraw speak to that. I know that we're in process, and we are planning for either contingency in our department. So if we are able to legally and hopefully amicably get out of our lease, then we are preparing for that. And then we will prepare for the other option as well.
Could do a follow-up? Okay, when you say you're prepared for that, if we have, if that lease is still ongoing, we have not received any release, do we have any indication from the landlord that they would entertain it? And if they don't and we're committed to it, you're absorbing it? It's not that we have to find $306,000 elsewhere from the budget, you're absorbing it within the SPED? Is that what I understand?
So if
Mr. DeGraw?
I could step in, yeah. So we're in the process of working with legal to get a communication to send out to the landlord. It's still to be determined for us to determine if we're going to be able to get out of that lease. I think Mr. Coriel was speaking to facility, and I don't think his plans were to absorb that cost of the lease in the event that we can't exit the lease. So in the event that we can't exit the lease, we're going to have to find another $310,000 in reductions.
In reductions, because it has to zero out. Okay, so we should have that in mind, right, at this stage, that we have to find $310,000 that's not
in the
yet.
event we can't exit that lease, we will have to find, yes, we have that contingency in mind.
And I had one other question at this time.
Go ahead, Mr. Doran.
Do I understand when we look at the SPED total budget, it looks like approximately $800,000 total increase, I believe. And if I understand correctly, that last year, as part of our approved budget, we had 24 SPED positions funded under CARES. The recommendation from the administration this year is no SPED out of CARES and everything within SPED. So
Yeah,
that
yes.
represents.
Yeah, so the total reduction is represented by or the addition, actually, we have the positions going from CARES back into hard funds, and then subtracting, for now, the $300,000 from the lease, and then the $150,000 from the FCSA contract. And just to clarify, staffing would be out of CARES completely, but we looked at our funding today. There's a little bit of CARES money that would still we would be using, but that's to fund the addition to our summer programs. And I have the totals. The remainder of this year, FY22, we have about $160,000 to greatly supplement our June programs for students, which was a success last year, and I'm excited about it this year. FY23, we have our kinder program, which is actually be in July. So we have our kindergarten readiness program, so that is about $55,000. And then at the end of FY23, we have that same approximately $165,000. So that guarantees us one more year of very large and robust, which I think at this time is important, summer programs. But that's the extent of our CARES funding going forward.
Okay. So, and I misspoke. Positions, there's none, but the summer school at $267,000 is recommended to come out of CARES by the administration. So again, wedded with the big.
So that those would stay in CARES to allow us to strengthen those programs. And I think, again, like Mr. DeGraw has talked about with CARES funds, I think it's fantastic that we have that funding, and we know we have 2 more summers of doing everything we can for kids. But then our job would be, if those are successful and they are necessary, then it would be our job in the department to find a way to take those over because CARES funds will be gone. So it would be working towards that if they are as critical as they are right now.
Thank you. I have another question if you can put me in the key.
So just to follow up on that, as Mr. Correll indicated, those programs straddle fiscal years. So there's one that happens in this 22 fiscal year and one that happens in 23, and then again in 23. And one of the reasons that it was important for us to keep those programs running and save a little pile of money to do that, is that that's specifically what those CARES funds were identified to do. And that's address the learning loss, the struggles that students go through. And I think we can all agree that our SPED students struggled immensely through the last couple of years. So that's really important to us that we protect those funds so we can run those programs as long as we can with that money.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
I have a question that I did not previously email to them. May I ask it?
Yes, please.
Thanks. So the Bridges lease is planning to be broken, but I did spend time at the facility at Bridge, and they advocated for the program to stay where it is due to it being the best location for the participants of that program. So where are we planning to move it, and how are we justifying moving them?
Several things. First of all, I agree. I've been part of that program for years. My wife was a teacher in the program. I love the program. The facility is not amazing. We've had difficulties in the neighborhood impacting our students directly and our staff directly. We've had leaks in the building that have impacted our supplies and such. So that's in my mind, is a reason I think it just is not the safest area in our school district. So our plan as of today is, and I don't know if Carly is still here, Carly opened her arms to us to get our students to Lathrop. And the reason that we looked at Lathrop is they have quite a bit of room right now. The food service for Bridge, again, it's that kind of like, it's like basically elementary type school service that would open up a wider range of services to students for nutrition. Nursing access, we have students who have medical needs at Bridge. Thankfully, we have our nurse here who will pick up the phone and run down there, but having access to a nurse, having access to more typical, relatively same age peers, I mean, they're all kind of in that same age band, I think will be advantageous. And the facilities that we've looked at with Ms. Sween are excellent. We have a room that we're looking at would be the cartridge, where we would, the cartridge runs that we do that actually pays the students a stipend. We have a spot for that. There's a number of beautiful classrooms that she's offered in a total suite that we could use. We have access to a kitchen, access to laundry. We have multiple exits to do cartridge runs and pick up from the buses. I don't see a giant downside to, I completely understand. Again, I've been a supporter and again, feel like part of Bridge for years, and I understand the thoughts around that. But I think in the end, it's going to be great. Recreational facilities, gym, mat room. We can run the program and add some things that we are not able to do at the Bridge building right now.
Go ahead, Ms. Marati.
Thank you. You actually answered a lot of my concerns, but there's one lingering. The Bridge program is a transition program from high school to adulthood. And so by keeping them in high school, I was told that it would eliminate that transition because they're still there. They're still around the folks that are that age. So the transition fails. So could you help me understand how keeping them in high school will help them transition out?
Well, they won't be in high school. They will be housed there, and you're right. They're not going to be completely independent. But again, I would stress that the opportunity to interact with same age peers, typical peers, is a bonus. It depends on the student as well. We have students who check in the morning at the Bridge program, do some of their routines, and then are out working for the rest of the day. That won't change. We have cartridge runs that go every single day all over the school district, and then we have the processing of those cartridges. So that would be done in a dedicated space for those students. So I feel like that the difficult things that we have to get through outweigh the some of the thoughts about staying in the Bridge building.
Thank you, Ms. Sanderson. and then Mr. Doran, and then Ms. Smith.
I don't remember what my question was. I was so caught up in what Mr. Curio was telling us, so I'll think of it in a minute here.
Mr. Doran?
Just since we're talking about Bridge, great compliment. I am a recipient of Bridge services in terms of student coming, doing a job, place that the SRC that I frequent. And it's just wonderful to watch the students and the staff with that. Question I had to, I've got two questions. One is just on the lease. When do we expect to act on that? I mean, will we have an answer before we do our recommended budget, or do we not know?
Yeah, we anticipate having a potential letter this week.
Okay, thank you. Then my question in terms of SPED, it's a cost revenue type of thing. And just bring me up to date, because there have been times when the district out of general funds had to subsidize SPED services. There was a period of time when SPED, because it generates a lot of its own funding, specialized multipliers, et cetera, that actually was able to help with general fund. Where do we stand now on that? And
I'm going to say in broad terms, and I'm going to very quickly give it to Mr. DeGraw, is that if you look at, you look at the approximately $30 million that comes out of the intensive funding, but in working with Mr. DeGraw over the last few years, realize that there's so many other things that go into the funding of those students that aren't accounted for in our very specific budget. And it's, it's maintenance, and it's transportation, a big one, and a lot of other things. So with that said, my understanding having increased over the years, that I would then punt it to Mr. DeGraw.
I'd have to do some number crunching to generate information that you're requesting, Mr. Doran.
Okay, thanks. And just a quick follow-up. In terms of my question there is recognizing that part of SPED is to be in is an integrated model that is so important, and so they're accessing both general and special ed things. So I want to recognize that too. But if we could take a look at that, thank you.
Ms. Sanderson, you remembered?
Yeah, Mr. Curio, when you spoke about summer for the kindergarten students, are we still implementing our summer program for our extended learning students still?
For ESY? Yes, ma'am. That will be the bulk of what we do always. So those, first of all, those are federally mandated. So that's 100%. That has to happen. So those will happen. Everything else is supplemental, and again, looking towards learning loss. So this year, and help me out if I forget something, we will hopefully have another partnership with CTE. Last year we had Intro to Trades. We hosted student interns who got credit trying to grow our own. From students, we're going to have our Ready to Learn type programs that are looking at academics and social emotional SEL for students who don't otherwise qualify for ESY. We will have, as a side note, we're going to continue our programs in North Pole. Hopefully we'll never go backwards and everybody have to bus in to so North Pole E will be a site for services during the summer. We'll be supporting credit recovery. And what am I missing?
In addition to the academic readiness that's for school-age students, what you're referring to as the kindergarten readiness program for our preschool students that are transitioning into a kindergarten program, and that's the one that happens in July. So those are two distinct programs.
Okay, thank you so much. That reassures that that program is going to continue. It's very effective, especially helping students, middle school and high school level, continue on and not lose learning loss, but to gain and be ready for the new school year. Thank you.
Yeah, and one other thing I didn't mention, I'm sorry, is last summer we also had a transition with the help of CERC. CERC came up and did transition support and services for students as well, for high school students.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. I appreciate hearing about the bridge transition. My daughter went to the bridge summer program last year in the building where they are now. And then my daughter's graduating, so she'll go to Bridge after this. And when you said Lathrop in your explanation, that makes me happy as a Bridge parent. I feel like I would feel safer taking my daughter to Lathrop, and that part of the other questions that were asked about, well, aren't you supposed to be getting them out of high school? Um, that's true, but they are not going to be attending general education classes and doing school. So I really, as a parent of a student at Bridge, I would be glad to take my student to Lathrop. So I just wanted to say that I like that plan.
I just want to say thank you for the presentation and the information provided this evening.
Okay,
We
thank you for letting
appreciate-
us, let us speak to you tonight.
We appreciate your efforts.
So now we're ready for our facilities and maintenance department. So I'll turn it over to Jay.
Thank you, Miss Milleen. I'm gonna try and share my screen. Okay, it's working. Okay, well, thank you. So my name is Jahanara Carrion, and I'm the Executive Director for Facilities. I'm just gonna make this pretty short. I think the one that I sent you was pretty, pretty long, so this is a more short version. So the Facilities Management Department serves our students, schools, and community by ensuring district facilities are a safe, clean, and inviting environment to learn, work, and play. And then to this end, the FMD provides building maintenance, preventive maintenance, vehicle fleet maintenance, utility and energy management, project services. We do major maintenance projects. We do deal with safety and compliance, custodial services, snow removal, security, emergency response, theater productions, and building rentals. Here's an overview of our department. We are 140 or 135 in total. And so there's the executive director, and then we have a facilities assistant director, and then we have grounds, and then a custodial manager who has one zone manager with 115 custodians, and that 115 does include cares. We have our one locksmith, and then we have a construction and projects manager who also takes care of some of the maintenance departments that we have. And I'm going to go over that in my next slides just so you can see the breakdown of our department. So I'm going to talk about our custodial services. So the custodial deals with, FMD primarily consists of custodial and grounds department, theater and building rentals, as well as maintenance. Together, FMD provides essential services that enable district buildings to offer our community a safe place for students and fellow employees. We have 38.4 12-month shift custodians. We have 27.4 12-month day custodians and a 0.6 10-month day custodian. We have 30 12-month head custodians, 8 10-month shift custodians, and 11 are currently under the CARES Act, which is not being, it will be eliminated for next year. So our maintenance department is comprised of many skilled tradesmen from various trades, and we serve 36 total buildings
We have about 2.4 million total square feet, over 600 acres of land, serving 12,268 students and 2,261 fellow employees. So in our general fund, we have 3 electricians, 3 electronic techs, 3 plumbers, 3 grounds crew, 2 boiler technicians. We have 2 carpenters, 1 painter, 1 locksmith, 1 wire puller, 1 equipment mechanic, 1 automotive mechanic, 1 HVAC technician, and 1 parts and purchasing. And we have 7 maintenance under the cares. So you can see we have a lot of positions where we only have 1 positions, and then they're serving 36 buildings. So here's a quick look at our budget. So in 2012, so I was just looking at 10 years ago. So 2012, our total FMD budget was 23.9 million. And today we're at 18.9 million. So we've seen a total of reduction of 5 million. Our custodial budget, we've seen a reduction of about 1.6 million over the years. And then our custodial staff, so we were at 134.4 custodians 10 years ago, and today we're looking at 102.4. Our maintenance budget was 12 million 10 years ago, and it's now down to 10 million, so we've seen a reduction of 1.8. And our maintenance staff was 27 10 years ago, and we have now looking at 25. So Ms. Smith mentioned what we can do to see some changes in our methods of cleaning. So just kind of want to mention that we did used to do zone cleaning, and so we shifted from zone cleaning to now a task-based cleaning. And moving forward with the reduction of 11 custodians, and I think there's 2 from the general fund, so we're looking at 13 in total. We have to shift the way that we clean, and we are looking at ways of reducing some of the services. So what that looks like, we're going to be looking at offices maybe getting that once or twice a week carpet cleaning. We're not going to be doing that every day. We're going to be doing gyms maybe once or twice a week. So we're not going to be taking away any cleaning at all. We're just going to be reducing those services. And it's the same with maintenance. We're not going to, we have to address all the issues that come up, but there's also a longer time frame now that's going to, we have to, so we want to address all the emergency safety ones first. There's a lot of backlog that now we're facing. So even this year, we've been getting a lot of work orders that I've simply have had to put on hold or wait for maintenance to come and address. So for example, if we're looking at our, plumbing, so if we reduce another plumber, I want to point out that just because we have 3 plumbers, it doesn't mean that they specialize in all the same field. So I've got 1 plumber that is going to be specifically just doing preventive maintenance, checking the valves, checking all those things. And I've got 1 plumber that specifically only deals with the sewer and the water, and I've got another plumber that's only dealing with the mechanical side. So if we're going to reduce 1 plumber, because you can see we have 3, we're losing an entire special field of that person, and so the other 2 plumbers are going to have to absorb that. And that puts a lot of strain in our department because they're now having to train or learn something that they're not really specialized in, and so that actually makes our work order backlog as well. And so my last slide is if you have any questions.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that I was not specifically saying that it has to be FMD. I'm just saying for me, everything's on the table, everything. And I was just curious that I just have to have things clear in my mind. I see like 90 positions are 12-month positions for the custodians. And if no one's at school for 2 months, why do we need 90 custodians for 2 months?
So in the summertime, we do deep cleaning, and that's the only time that we're able to wax the floors, shampoo the carpets. We try to do that during the school day, but we have to do general cleaning during the school day, school year. So during the summer, we do a much more deep cleaning. We also support our summer programs as well that happen over in summer, and so that's the reason why we need to keep our 12-month custodians all year round.
And if I might just make one additional comment for our FMD folks. Ms. Karen has illustrated that, the decline of personnel in FMD, and one of the residual effects of that is deferred maintenance. So we've had to defer a lot of maintenance, and I think something that this winter break snowstorm kind of brought to the front is that that can turn around and bite us bad if we continue to defer maintenance on some of our buildings. So that's a residual effect of some of the cuts that FMD had. And I know I've said this before, but I can't say it enough times, is the phenomenal job that our FMD department did through our 100-year snow event over the holiday. You can see the amount of people that did, the obvious amount of work that was done, and the leadership from Ms. Carrion to coordinate that, to work with contractors to get us ready to start school when it was time to start school. So a Herculean effort on their part, running short-staffed. So just one more shout out to our FMD folks for a job well done.
Ms. Anderson and then Ms. Smith.
Well, I want to thank you for the effort that also I know that you're doing. It does get worrisome when I see the number one repeated so many times because just with COVID hitting, just having one HVAC technician, we're going through our buildings with codes, the filters and different things like that to make sure that was part of the mitigation plan. That layered plan is having the ventilation systems. And so it's just worrisome to see the ones all over the page. But I understand where we are. Statement. And this is not the end all to be all solution, but I listened to President Pitney, I believe her name is, and she's just emphasized all the way along between the healthcare demands and our teaching demands, how we have to grow our own. And I know that the facilities maintenance has and correct me if I'm wrong, you have a student-led workforce, something that we partner with, or young people that are coming alongside of us. So I'm just looking at our trees back there. Is there any possible, and I tapped Mr. DeGraw the other night when I said this, and I wasn't being flippant, it's just thinking outside that box. I think that demands, that's where we find ourselves with Carl Perkins money to do some sort of a trades, program on the spot in training with our students.
So I've briefly discussed it with Mr. Minor on what we can offer for some of our CTE students. I think so it's something to consider, but I think there's a lot of legalities or things like that that we have to also look at. But it is something that we have thought about. We have a mechanic. It would be great if we can have some students that can come and do some oil change or change a tire, something very simple like that. So it is something that I am interested in, and we want to see where we can go with that.
Comment is the reason which I've stated in Juneau and different directors and department heads that I've talked to over the years. One of the reasons that we've been able to defer maintenance and any other thing is because of the excellent staff and the focus and loyalty that these professionals bring to their job. And one other thing that I just want to add is that over the summer, another reason to have a 12-month employee in place is vandalism. And they patrol, they do safety, building checks, and system checks throughout the entire year. I only know that because I came out of that. So 35 years gives me something. Thank you.
We have Miss Smith, then I was in the queue, Mr. Doran, and then Miss Marani.
Thank you. I only wanted to say that I just only wondered. I wasn't thinking, I wasn't thinking we should go take 90 people to 10 months. I was just curious. So it's fine.
I just wanted to state kind of what I had stated last year during our budget process, that we have already cut FMD, I mean, just as much as it possibly can. And we need to ensure that we can have the people who are trained and specialized. Because if we have to go out and pay every time that an emergency happens, every time that a boiler breaks, every time that we have a plumbing issue, every time that we have any of those things, it will cost us way more than what we currently are paying in our budget. And I'm hoping, Mr. DeGraw, that eventually we'll be able to ensure that some of those care funded positions will be able to make it back into the general fund.
Yes, President Luke, and this was part of a talking point I was going to provide at the very tail end of this presentation, but my intent is that my recommendation is that all 7 of the maintenance positions in CARES currently must be gotten back into the general fund budget. I think we were at 40 positions in the maintenance world 2 years ago, or the year before last. We reduced that tremendously for the current year, and we really have reduced beyond a level that is responsible. Great, as has been referenced, great people, and we're pretty much not doing them a service by having one person in this trade and one person in this trade having to run from building to building. And there were tales of heroism and harrowing danger as they walked through buildings as it rained down and ceiling tiles. True story, over the 100-year snow event that Miss Moline referenced. And, case in point, one plumber, running from school to school, and that's a true story. And so, yes, our strong recommendation will be that all maintenance positions currently funded by CARES would be restored back to the general fund.
Thank you. Mr. Doran and then Miss Marati.
Thank you. Couple of questions, starting us with the presentation. Did I understand that we're cutting 11 custodial positions?
So those 11 custodians were under the CARES 2, was it CARE and 3,
Right.
and then 2 from the general fund.
Okay, so your department will need to operate with 11 fewer custodians than you had last year.
That's correct.
Some of those would be from the closed schools, I assume, but it's an additional cut to the FMD staff. So that cuts down on services. Can you handle that?
So I believe 11 of those, I think 9 of those positions were from the closed schools. And then the other positions, and I mentioned that earlier, we're going to have to look at some way. So not all schools may see that different style of cleaning, the task-based cleaning, but some of the high schools and the middle schools may see a different set of cleaning, like offices once a week, etc.
And then on the maintenance side, And I guess to the question, Mr. Guerrero, you were saying, we are currently funding 7 maintenance positions. Those are those in the positions, are they in addition to the ones that are on your slide?
So
So
I
like
can
one-
give you a
the one
breakdown.
plumber might be hiring another plumber. What's the cut without it?
Okay, so I'll give you a breakdown of what those positions are. So preventive maintenance is one of those, a carpenter, an electrician, an HVAC person, so we want to add another HVAC person, so we have 2. One grounds person, one warehouse person, and we have a maintenance foreman, which we want to change into a preventive maintenance position.
Okay, and do I understand those 7 would be in addition to what's here?
Yes.
Correct. It would move it from 31 to 38 in the book.
And so dependent on CARES?
Yes.
Again, but are you looking down the line when you say to get it back into the general fund?
Correct.
As opposed to this, for the next fiscal year, they will have to come out of CARES if they're funded?
Correct. At some point in time after FY23.
So that would have to be part of our recommended and approved budget. Okay, okay, and if you would put me back in the queue.
So just, so you know the conversations that we've had when we talk about priorities that are in CARES funding and moving to general funding, these positions are very close to the top when we talk about migrating positions over. So additional funding, money coming from someplace, that would be our top priority, to move those into the hard dollar budget.
I put you back in the queue. Thank you. Ms. Marati?
This is a question for Andy, or Mr. DeGraw, sorry. Page 84, facilities, under just general expense and revenue. The approved fiscal year 22 budget is $10,590,041 for facilities. But in the proposed budget this year, fiscal year 22 states that it's $10,555,830. So it's a difference of $34,211. And I noticed this in other areas of the budget where the starting amounts were different from the previous approved budget. So if you could let me know why the difference in this one, and then maybe if it's the same for all of them, or if you can answer that too.
Yeah, let me look into that, and I'll provide an answer, Ms. Marati.
Thanks.
Mr. Doran?
Okay, and thank you. And want to say, really appreciate what FMD tries to do, and I understand work orders are as much as 2 years out, which impacts the classroom. So my question is, in terms of looking at the facilities maintenance component, the 82 to 84 pages, where do we stand on the cost of the closed buildings? Are they going to the borough? Are they not? What's the cost for if we have to mothball them versus maintaining a building? You know, particularly, so if Joy, where are we with that conversation, and is that factored in here? Same thing with Anderson and with Nordale. What's the cost to keep Nordale operational versus mothballing? But on the other 2 schools, mothballing, turning them over, where do we stand? How does that impact? How does it reflect in our budget?
So I'll start with the buildings that we're closing, Anderson and Joy. In our conversation with Mayor Ward, just to start at the beginning, those buildings go back to the borough. Those 2 buildings, because we won't be doing educational services in those buildings any longer. So they go back to the borough. In our conversation with Mayor Ward, they're already in conversation with the base for the Anderson facility, and they're still in conversation about what to do with Joy. But from our perspective, we are handing that back to them, and they get to do with it whatever they see fit. And then for the expense for Nordale, I'll pass it over to Mr. DeGraw, and he can give us some figures on maintaining that particular facility.
So let me put some numbers together on that, Mr. Dorn. I did provide anticipated costs for if when we repurpose the building, but you're specifically asking for costs if we were to mothball the building? Okay.
Right.
And so just to give you, I can come up with numbers on this, but just to give you kind of a general idea of where that would land, it would be a significantly smaller portion of our anticipated utilities. We would obviously turn lights off, electricity is our single largest utility bill, so lights off would dramatically reduce that bill. Heating costs would go down, so probably a 70 to 80% drop in utility costs, and then very minimal costs associated with doing walkthroughs of the building on a periodic basis to ensure nothing's gone sideways. But yeah, mothballing a building would reduce 80, 90% of those costs associated with repurposing the building.
Okay, thank you. So it's 0 for, and is that reflected in our budget here? If it's 0 for Joy and Nordale for the coming year?
So if I recall correctly, and I'm going to verify this, I believe costs associated with repurposing the building are in the proposed budget. Let me verify that. I'm 87.6% sure on that.
So,
I like that specificity.
I'm gonna get a response here shortly. I'll confirm or deny that.
So another part that we'll want to consider, and I'm 87% sure that we'll need to have a conversation with the borough and what their lease agreements are, because we may be required to offer services in the building for us to keep the building. So I'll have to double check on that. When you're talking about mothball, you're saying like no services being provided in that building. So let us double check on that if we can do that in our agreement with the borough.
And my other question on the facilities maintenance, just on page 84, explanation of the rentals for the Hutch building and the Howard Luke. Is that because they're on university land? Are they both on university land? Or I don't, why? What are those rentals?
So Hutch is on, I believe the UAF owns the building. Is that correct? Or the land? Or they rent from us, but they own the building. We own the land. I have to verify that.
So as far as I understand, is rental income from the university for the facility. And then the Howard Luke building is the home of our Effie Cochran Charter School.
Okay. All right. Got it. Thank you.
Ms. Marati?
In the school closure presentations, it was quoted that the cost to set up Nordale as for the homeschool and e-learning repurposing would cost $20,000 total. So the $10,000 to set up e-learning and $10,000 to set up BEST. Where would we find these costs in the budget?
They would be basically in our maintenance budget. We would expense the dollars in maintenance.
Can you show me where?
I will make note and
Okay.
get back to you, Ms. Marati.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, FMD and everything for the information.
So our final presentation is Information Systems and Technology, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Gentry for his presentation.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Board. It's an honor to be here. In the interest of time, I'm going to go through my first few slides pretty quickly on the makeup of our IT team. However, I would like to note that each and every one of the individuals that you see in our org chart is a complete rock star. So with that noted, we'll get going. My name is James Gentry. I'm your CITO, and here in ITS, these are all of my direct reports. We've noted that in FMD there are departments of one, and we have our armies of one here as well. The top four directly underneath of me, our records manager, our information security officer, and our research analyst, Dr. Ott, are all armies of one as well. So with network services, these are our folks who take care of all of our end user devices, including all of our student devices, all of our phones, our surveillance system, and the network that connects everything together. Our administrators, they take care of tens of thousands of devices in an automated fashion and hundreds of applications, add-ons, and plugins. Our computer technicians, they are our top tier of device repair and support for all student devices, staff laptops, printers, etc. Our school technology specialists, these are our on-site tech support folks in the schools. They do a lot of software and application installation management and support, as well as staff our help desk, and I'll talk about the help desk here a little more shortly. Finally, our network technicians, they provide maintenance and administration of our local area network, our wireless networks, our VoIP phone system, and the hundreds of cameras in our surveillance security system. Student information systems, these folks manage all student information, the systems involved where all that data lives, and they handle a lot of the data integration as we tie in all these services and systems together. There's a lot of data that needs to flow around. So these folks provide also the support for PowerSchool, our lottery application system, and our online registration system. Our system and database admin here maintains and administers all of the servers that these things live upon and provides security for PowerSchool. Our support technicians, these folks here are our top tier PowerSchool support folks. So these three ladies are the folks who are primary support if someone at a school is having an issue. And then our level 2 technician helps a lot with the data integration, providing our tech tidbits and whatnot. For business information systems, these are our folks who administer and manage all enterprise-level business systems and software, which will include Munis, TimeClock Plus, and all Google resources. Without these folks, the business of our district grinds to a halt. So our system and database admins here, they take care of all data centers throughout the district, of which we have 4. This includes hundreds of servers and over a petabyte, that is over 1,000 terabytes of local data storage. So I'm going to slow it down just a little bit because now we're going to get into the meat of what technology provides. So I want to give an idea of the magnitude of the numbers that we're looking at here. Our total device count, which is going to include our physical servers, virtual servers, all of our wireless access points, the 800 surveillance cameras spread out across almost 40 physical locations, over 2,000 VoIP phones, and then all of the devices you see here at the top of this chart. If we're to take just the computer techs who provide the actual repair, if there's a device that's broken or something like that, and we divide up we remove the servers and we take just those top 4 lines and then we divide that by the number of computer technicians we have. That's about 6,000 devices to one employee. If we take our SSTs, these are the folks who are in our schools, and we divide the number of SSTs into that same number of devices, it's about 4,000 to 1. Just wanted to give you an idea of the ratio and the magnitude of what it is we support with the number of people that we support. The level of services provided by these servers and storage, again, I want to talk about what does it look like. And Mr. Doran, I'll be answering your question that you said you would ask of each of us. What does it look like to take more cuts to FTE, to personnel? One of those things is that without Munis, we're going to go back to pen and paper for things for like timekeeping, all procurement for the entire district, all employee actions, all of those things that are automated now and we use these electronic systems for, we'd be going back to pen and paper. Same thing with PowerSchool. We'd be back to paper attendance, paper grading, and paper report cards. There'd be filing cabinets everywhere. On this slide, I just wanted to show you the level of work orders that we've had. So you can look in about 2019, things started to skyrocket with the pandemic in 2020 and in 2021. And of course now we're projecting as of the 1st of March, we have about 70,845 work orders serviced already this year. And so we're projecting that we're going to be well over 11,000 again this year. I wanted to note with this slide as well that with one-to-one devices, a part of the reason for this gain that we see is that when we had to go remote learning, we had to effectively train up a large portion of our community on how to use these technologies, how to get these devices online, and how to help their students to get their work done. And as we can see, that workload remains with us. So cybersecurity, I'll go through this fairly quickly. I think the numbers speak for themselves. So for leaked passwords, this is a service that we get through Google on the back end. Effectively, how this works is that Google lets us know, they notify us, they alert us when any of our users' passwords, to include all of our students, are detected on a hacker site on the dark web as a compromised account or a known weak password. They will notify us, and then our information security officer will take action and make sure that the password gets changed. Down in the corner, and I'll speak to this a little bit on our budget overview slide, is our Sentinel-1 EPP EDR. That stands for Endpoint Protection or Endpoint Detection and Recovery. So our information security officer, working with some of the aforementioned sysadmins, he's been hard at work in getting this installed on all of our staff systems, our servers. And as you can see, we have over 2,800 workstations protected currently and over 300 servers. And every day that number is growing. It's important. I don't think I can overstate how important this is. And I'll speak to this on our budget overview. We currently have over 100 threats detected so far this year, 109, but 8 of those were false positives. Some of these will be things like a Trojan payload that someone had clicked something, or some adware, stuff like that. And so this is helping protect our data. Finally, for cybersecurity, I wanted to mention phishing. So in the cybersecurity world, the greatest threat will always be an insider threat. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's intentional. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's someone who wanted to harm the district. However, it can be someone who just accidentally clicks something. And so We wanted to train up our staff. When we first engaged with No before, we went through a baseline, and that baseline came back at about 14.2%. That's our threat, or if you look at 100% of employees, 14% of them clicked on something they shouldn't have. Our current average after all of this training is less than 5%. And I'd like to note that the industry average is over 6%, so we're doing pretty good. Records management, this is, again, a department of one, and I think this slide speaks for itself. Our records manager does a lot. She handles all of our transcripts requests, our records requests, when we are subpoenaed, OCS inquiries. Again, I think that this slide speaks for itself. It's a department of one. And I don't believe the board needs any introduction to Dr. Ott, also an army of one. So Dr. Ott is responsible for our data dashboards that many of us use to look at how we are doing as a district. Many of us ask him questions, and he leads the state and, in fact, in some areas the nation with things like our advanced early warning system. So now I want to take, on these last 2 or 3 slides here, I want to point out where we are versus where we've been. This is our FTE comparison. So as you can see, we're projecting 31.5. However, there are 2 positions that are CARES funded that are not counted in that FTE number. I'd like to note that we have been taking FTE reductions for the last few years, while at the same time dealing with greatly increased demands on IT services. We have achieved this by making efficiencies and, as I will describe in 2 slides, recognizing some efficiencies through reorganizing. For our budget comparison, I think this slide also speaks for itself, but there are a couple of things I want to note that we have decided to invest in. I noted on the cybersecurity slide the Sentinel-1 EDR. That is a net plus $103,000 that is reflected in my budget. And I also want to call out an addition of approximately $160,000 for temp salaries. And this is going to be to cover some upcoming gaps that I'll explain on the next slide. The final thing I would like to note here is that if the board will recall, as part of cuts last year due to enrollment drop, I zeroed out our server maintenance and replacement fund. What that looked like in the budget is the equipment over $5,000. So I zeroed that out last year. So working with Mr. DeGraw, we were able to cover that gap with CARES funds, but in upcoming years, that is something that we will have to add back in some form. So we are looking, I am looking at reorganizing network services. And the reason why we're looking at doing this is that Mr. Adams retired a few months ago, and he was our primary VoIP phone resource as well as an all-around solid network admin. And the great and industrious Mr. Robert Hingst, our current Director of Network Services, will be retiring at the end of April. While I am happy for both of these stellar human beings, the reality is that they represent a combined 50+ years of experience and district knowledge that we will be losing. To cover that gap and also to realize some efficiencies, we are doing the following. And I'm just going to note this here and then we'll go to questions. The aforementioned $160,000 gain to temp salaries for next year. This is right-sizing our number of direct reports and responsibility levels, and there is no FTE gain to realize this. Now, what this is an addition of a user services director. I would be creating another team within my department. Currently, every one of these positions that you see reports to the network services director. And in order to divide the number of direct reports and the level of responsibility, I'm doing this here. Now, again, this is no FTE gain, and it's a right sizing of the department. So with that said, I would like to invite any questions.
Ms. Marati?
Thank you for the presentation. One of my questions was the $160,000 increase for temps. I hear what you're saying, but I don't understand it. Could you, so you're right-sizing the number of direct reports and responsibility levels in addition to another team within IT. So maybe if you could explain again or a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently, if you look at the slide here, which shows the reorg, this would be after the reorg is done. Every single position that's currently on here, the user services director that you see is currently a sysadmin position that is effectively going to be changed into the director, but that still counts as a position. So every one of these right now currently reports to Mr. Hingst. At the height, I'd have to go back through and count where we were before we started taking cuts. Mr. Hingst had 18 direct reports. He managed fully half of my entire department. And if you start looking at the level of responsibility for that, we have the help desk, all of the device repair. We've gone one-to-one. All of the network with all the aforementioned surveillance system, the phone system, just everything. It's a lot. And when you're looking at trying to recruit someone to come in and replace, number one, that level of experience, but also you want to throw that level of responsibility at them, it can be pretty tough. So am I getting closer to answering what you're looking for, Ms. Marati?
I think you're trying to justify it, and I don't need you to justify it. I just need to know what that cost is going to go to.
There is no cost for this movement. So as part of this, I am vacating a computer tech position. Oh, the 160,000? I see. So right now we are going to be recruiting for the network tech. That has been vacant for a couple of months now. And frankly, with Mr. Hink's retirement, we're going to have a gap there as well. That $160,000 is going to help us to cover the gap of those two retirements as we get someone new in and train them up, cover that gap. And also, we need extra help to install a lot of the equipment that has been purchased to upgrade our network via the CARES funds.
Can I follow up one more?
Yes, please.
Okay, so just so that I understand, so the 162,000 is a temporary position that will be there until you hire, completely hire the new network director.
Correct.
Plus the installation of some of the equipment.
Correct. I am looking to potentially reduce that in the following fiscal year. However, then please note that at some point I'm going to have to add in the server replacement, at least some of that to start to bridge old equipment there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Doran?
Thank you, and thank you for anticipating my question. I'll come back to it in a second, just for a little elaboration. But on page 164, it looks like 2 positions were reduced.
Yes, so one of those positions is a network tech position that had been reporting to our business information group. That position was moved back to network services when that individual had quit some time ago. I went ahead and moved that network position back to network services. The other position is the migration or the movement of one of the sysadmin positions to CARES funds.
Okay, so if I look on page 161, the increase in staffing then under support, that's where that position was moved to. Is that correct?
I believe, yes, that is correct.
Okay, and then just above it, that there is a position non-represented that's cut. And I guess maybe to put two things together, there, when I look through this, there are two positions that are cut out of this budget that doesn't account for the CARES positions.
Correct. So if I understand your question, sir, we have two positions that are CARES funded that are not reflected in the 31.5 FTE count in the proposed budget.
Okay, so the 33.5 that's on your slide, sorry, the page number is really small under your 10-year FTE comparison. Yeah. Okay, so the 33.5, you're cutting two positions from those, and none of those 33.5 included CARES. Do I understand that?
No, I am cutting one computer tech that is reflected in that number. And then also one sysadmin position is being moved to CARES. So the final column on this slide is 31.5, but I have one sysadmin that's being moved to CARES, and I have one sysadmin that was already CARES.
Okay. So the administration recommendation is for actually 33.5 total positions, two of which are funded by CARES.
Correct.
So since you asked my question, which I had written down, is what would happen if you didn't get these CARES positions? So you explained that. So really, as we look at this budget in here, it funds 31.5 positions, and we must, in terms of your presentation, be looking at those two positions CARES funded. So.
Correct. Yeah, to build on, I'd like to answer just a little bit more to what would happen to technology if we had to take cuts beyond what we have proposed here. It's kind of like an analogy. If you have 100 marbles and they're spread out amongst 5 people, and you start to cut 1 or 2 of those, you have a whole bunch of marbles that you still have to take care of, right? And so when your team reaches a size, like if you look at my SSTs or my computer techs, and we've cut there. We cut there last year, the SSTs, I removed a position, and we're proposing cutting a computer tech this year. You get to a tipping point where that program becomes non-sustainable in its current fashion. So what that would look like if we had to take cuts here beyond what we're at, because we have so many untouchables in technology. We can't cut Munis. We can't cut PowerSchool. We can't cut Time Clock Plus. All of those things are, they're not touchable. So it greatly reduces where we can look at for further cuts. And that's where we start looking at, is our help desk even viable anymore? You know, do we have enough staff to man the phones? Do we have enough staff to stay ahead of repairing student devices? Those sorts of things.
Can I do a follow-up?
Yes, please.
Okay. I appreciate the load that your department is carrying. But just so I can understand the numbers, so really this year, you have a total staff of 35.5 to try and accomplish all those things. Am I correct? That's the 33.5 plus 2 cares.
Plus 1. So it's currently 34.5 if you count the one sysadmin I currently have funded by CARES.
Okay, plus one care, okay. And for this coming year then, you're really asking for a staffing of 33.5, which does represent a loss of one staff member from this year, regardless of funding.
Correct.
So you're trying to,
I am reducing by 1 computer tech. That is the proposal, yes.
okay. And that we do absolutely fund 2 positions from CARES.
Correct.
That's dependent on, okay. And I've got a general question after we're done.
Any other questions for IT? Go ahead, Mr. Doran.
Okay, help me out here. Each of the departments we've gone through, their plan of service depend on our approving the CARES. That becomes part of our recommended budget. When do we marry them together? Understanding that funding comes and goes, and just as we don't know what the state's going to give us or what the borough's going to give us, it's year by year, which is an unfortunate thing to our system right now. So when do we marry these, and when do they show up as actually part of our budget?
Mr. DeGraw.
All right, so I see us, I'm not sure what you have in mind, Mr. Dorn, on marrying them, what that means. I see the board approving a CARES budget at the same time as you approve a recommended budget. That last week, and I think Ms. Tuttle just sent out additional dates for potential meetings. We're going to need to follow the same process, very, very similar process that we followed last year. And we will have an official document that the board will have in front of them. We'll have itemized CARES expenditures, just as we did last year. And so I see that happening at the same time as you approve a final recommended budget. As far as timing is concerned, we just don't have the ability to show itemized CARES expenditures in this book the same way we do general fund expenditures. We don't have that capacity right now. It doesn't exist.
Okay, if I can ask then, as I put my head around this, as we're going through each department, I need to keep in mind that what's being presented, and each department has had CARES funded aspects, that if we like the department piece, we're really saying yes to these CARES pieces. I know we can change any number in either book or piece of paper, and we'll get down to that at some point. But okay, so that's what we're doing, and that's why I guess I keep asking, okay, what is dependent on this?
If I may respond, yeah, thank you.
Yes.
And I hear you, Mr. Doran. It's a lot of departments, a lot of positions, it's a lot of line items. I get you. So I think what what I would like to facilitate is a process as we get to where we're coalescing and getting into the final stages of approving budgets. We could have a deliberate process where we go, almost line by line and make sure that the board understands each expenditure as you're approving as part of the overall CARES budget. So I support a process that we're kind of bringing everything full circle and there's a good solid understanding of what the board is. I 100% support that. So I think we'll be able to get there. It's I talk with my staff often about how the crazy times we're in, and the day we get back to just a general fund budget will be like a vacation, right? I mean, it'll be like, wow, it's Christmas in whatever month, because but in the meantime we have the CARES funds, and I think I'm pretty optimistic we'll be able to get to a process here as we wrap up recommended to where the board has a good solid understanding of what you're approving. So.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. Andy already answered me, because I just was remembering that we did this same exact thing last year, that we approved our budget, but we had an understanding that certain things were going to be funded out of CARES, and we ran that sort of side budget. I just, I got the feeling like maybe there was some thought it was something different, but it's the same, right?
Yes, Ms. Smith, it is the same. And I think where part of the confusion could come from, and, Mr. Dorn can nod if this is accurate, or if not, shake your head. It's having a good understanding also of what's being reduced from current year. There's certain things in current year CARES that are being proposed to be reduced and cut outright, quite frankly. And so what are we approving? And how does that link to each department in the CARES budget, to the general fund budget? And then also, what are we eliminating as a district going forward? And that type of information is in the original packet that the board received when we presented proposed. Specific detailed information is in there on what was out. It's CARES, this is going to another funding source. CARES, this is being eliminated. CARES, this is being rolled over to next year CARES. It's like many different categories, right? So, but yes, that was the process. The difference, Ms. Smith, is last year was the first year of CARES. We were kind of starting fresh. Now we're looking at CARES comparisons, right? I readily admit, pretty complicated and convoluted, and it can be easy. It's kind of like a bowl of spaghetti. It can be easy to get lost. So I'm committed. I think admin, we're committed to making sure that's as easy to understand as process as possible. So understanding the complexities.
And in the new, the revised CARES 3 fiscal year 23 that was given to us this evening, it goes by department as well, so we can follow through as we're going through each one of the departments through the budget. Any further questions for IT? Mr. DeGraw?
Just one final, very quick statement. I would classify the IT department in similar terms as our FMD department. We're pretty much getting to the end of the line with technology as far as reductions that can be made. Just like in many ways FMD, the responsibilities are growing, in the IT department, responsibilities growing, workloads increasing due to, as we entered COVID and are exiting COVID. I think the educators can speak much more eloquently to this than I can. The delivery of education has changed in many ways, and we were moving towards technology anyway, but I think a lot of things were expedited, things were changed, and so if anything, workload's going up in our IT department. And so I just want to acknowledge the position reduction. This is a net reduction in a position in the IT department, and similar to FMD, we're really getting to the end of the line on what we can reduce, and any further reductions, as Mr. Gentry articulated, would involve this is what we're having to shut down as far as services to schools and programs.
Ms. Marati?
On page 165, under Business Information Systems, under Purchase Services, and other in the notes. So the cost increased, but the items listed in the notes decreased. So I just need to know what is causing the increased cost.
Yes, thank you for this question. I could have been a little more clear on some of this. So a large portion of this increase is that our licensing, our support, our software as a service, things that we pay for, those contracts, they typically see about a 3 to a 5% increase annually. And so some of what you're seeing there is included in that increase. Also, the Tyler DR, the Munis Disaster Recovery, that is a new paid-for service that we have included this year. And then Microsoft Campus Agreement, it's not getting any cheaper. It's one of those that we see that annual increase. And then under the Canon printing and licensing, that one fluctuates year to year. And so there was a slight increase there because of the number of printers that we bring in, and they require more support. So in total, that's why you saw some things disappear, because we're trying to make efficiencies, we're trying to make cuts. However, just year to year, the cost of business, it keeps on getting more expensive.
All right, it looks as though we are good to go. Mr. Durham, one last question.
Could you explain where we are with the equipment fund, replacement fund? I know it's not strictly technology, but I believe most of the conversation has been that that's the predominant use of it or projected use of it at this time. So we've got 1.5, a little less than that, million. What are we expecting to expend? Where do we stand with that need?
Yeah, so that charge from the general fund to the equipment replacement fund, we have held status quo. I believe it's $58.50 per student. And I don't have the number right in front of me, but it probably generates somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000 to be transferred to that equipment replacement fund. Ideally, it covers more than just student devices, but at those levels, it's probably realistic that it would only cover student devices. So we did get a little bit of bump from CARES funding in that arena as well, so that's helped us. But just to specifically answer your question, Mr. Doran, that we held that charge as status quo, $58.50 per student.
So the 1.5 million in that account, how do we anticipate I'm assuming that we just status quo basically to last year's. We spent it down.
Correct.
We spend that.
We will need to plan out our planned expenditures as far as devices are concerned, and then we can have an estimate for you on how that'll impact the 1.5 million balance there.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate your presentation and the information. Ms. Moline?
That concludes our department presentations for this evening. For tomorrow, we'll be ready to talk alternative learning systems again and answer any questions. And if any of the board members have specific questions about those learning systems and you want to get them to us ahead of time so we can come ready to speak to them, that'd be great. And then some of the other things that came out of the meeting we'll be ready to talk about tomorrow night.
Perfect. And just as a recap, music was one of the big ones. And I know district-wide possible cuts in non-classroom personnel. Was there any other big one? Because I know that Ms. Marati and Mr. Doran had a couple of questions that I know Mr. DeGraw is going to work on getting answers to. Were there any other big items as we go into budget for tomorrow evening? All right, well, seeing none. I appreciate all the work and effort on our budget discussion for tonight. Ms. Marati, did you have a question?
Are we going to have closing comments tonight?
Typically, since we end around 8, but if you have something that you would like to share tonight, I'd love to give you the floor.
Thanks. So while locally we're pinching pennies in order to manage our funding needs, the statewide level, our legislators are fighting for an increase to the state funding through the base student allocation. That's the amount provided to the district per student. So one of the reasons that we're sitting here tonight in a situation about talking about cutting arts and music and increasing class sizes and so on, is because the state hasn't increased the base student allocation for 5 years. So right now, 2 bills, HB 272 and HB 273, have traction in Juneau and are at the House Finance Committee as of today. And if passed, we could receive increased funding to help offset some of these rising costs that we're grappling with right now and every year going forward. So I just wanted to take some time to encourage everyone to email testimony to the members of the House Finance Committee. That's house.finance@akleg.gov. CC your House rep. And if you don't know who your rep is, you can find that also at akleg.gov by typing in your address. And even if you wrote an email to the House Education Committee previously, you should still email again to the House Finance Committee because they're 2 different committees, two different groups of people. And if you need any help, feel free to reach out. I'm sure any of us can help you with that. So feel free to reach out to me or any of your board or admin staff. So thanks for the time.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ms. Marati, for encouraging people to reach out to our legislators. On that note, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Meeting is adjourned, and we will meet again tomorrow evening.